In this video, I'm gonna talk about some of the most evil people that have ever existed. I'm talking about kids who carried out school shootings all the way to people who hijacked planes trying to murder hundreds of people on board. So ladies and boxheads, let's just get into it. The Nashville shooting. March 27th, 2023, yet another mass shooting took place in America. This time at the Covenant School in Nashville, Tennessee. 28-year-old Aiden Hale, a transgender man who had attended the school as a kid, approached the school for the final time. At 9:54, Hale drove to the school and had told a friend that an earlier made Instagram post was a note. The friend tried to call the crisis hotline, but it was too late. Hale was about to attack the students around the same ages as Sandy Hook, 8 and 9 years old. 10:11 a.m., Hale, armed with a rifle, a carbine, and a pistol, shot through a set of glass doors and entered the building. A custodian saw him enter and Hale shot him multiple times. The smoke from the gunfire triggered the fire alarm, and several staff members heard the shots and knew there was an active shooter. Hale went up to the second story and ran into several students and faculty. Hale opened fire and killed 3 students and a substitute teacher. The students weren't even 10 years old yet. Hale went through the halls and looked for more people to kill. The teachers acted fast and herded the kids out of the building. Most of the students escaped unharmed. At 10:13, the police had received the call and were on their way. Sirens blared while people ran out of the building, scared and terrified. Everyone clear the area right now. At 10:23, the officers entered the school building. Go, 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 clear! And made their way to the second floor where Aiden Hale was waiting. Gunfire erupted and 2 of the 5 officers shot 4 times each, killing Aiden on the spot, ending his massacre before it got worse. But the damage was already done. The motive was unclear, but they did find a rambling, hate-filled manifesto in his home. This is the horrifying story of Colleen Stan, the woman who spent 7 years trapped inside a box under a bed, as a slave to a completely psychotic couple. But first, I need to tell you how she even got kidnapped in the first place. The story begins in May 1977. 20-year-old Colleen Stan was hitchhiking from Eugene, Oregon to Northern California. She was on her way to a friend's birthday party. That day, she already turned down 2 rides from random people. Then that's when a bright blue van pulled up right in front of her. A young couple sat in the front, Cameron Hooker, 23 years old, behind the wheel, and his wife, 19-year-old Janice, in the passenger seat. And in the back, there was a small baby. It was a normal, kinda looking family. They asked her if she needed a ride. Colleen got a good vibe. She felt safe. So she got in. She had absolutely no idea she just condemned herself to 7 years in captivity. For the first 30 minutes, everything seemed fine. The couple made small talk with her. The baby cooed softly in the back. Then suddenly, the man Cameron made a sharp turn. The van completely swerved off the main road. Colleen started to panic as Cameron pulled over in a deserted, wooded area. Before she could react, he reached into the back seat, pulled out a knife, and pressed it to her throat. Don't move. Her breath caught in her throat. Before she could scream, he placed a specially designed wooden box over her head. No, seriously, I'm not even kidding. You see, Cameron Hooker was actually a very skilled carpenter. He had built a box just right. You know the headgear worn by the artist Marshmallow? Well, think of that, but wooden. Soundproof, lightproof, and escape-proof. Everything was black. The next thing Colleen knew, the van was moving again. She had no idea where they were going. It was hours later when the vehicle came to a stop. The van door creaked open. Footsteps. Colleen was then being lifted and dragged. Then she was being carried down some stairs. Then, darkness. Cameron had led her into his basement. He removed the box from her head, and for the first time, she saw where she was. She was now inside another larger wooden crate in a basement. He forced her inside, chaining her wrists so she couldn't move. Then he left her there for the night. That first night, she cried herself to sleep. The space was too small for her to lie down, so she had to sleep sitting up.
Then, ladies and box heads, the real nightmare began. Cameron had these dark desires, twisted fantasies. Until now, he'd been acting them out on his wife, Janice. But she was tired of being the victim. She wanted a replacement. And guys, Colleen was the replacement. The torture started that very next day. She was pulled from the crate and strung up by her wrists, her feet barely touching the ground. The first lash of the whip sent fire through her skin. Then another and another, over and over again until her body was all scratched up and shaking. This continued for days. Then Cameron decided to turn it up a notch. I seriously cannot believe I'm gonna say this. And then came the electricity. He got a car battery and began to shock her. Man, I feel bad just knowing this happened to her. Then the burns. Then to make everything a million times worse began the assault. The days blurred into weeks, the weeks into months, the months into years. She prayed for death, but the death never came. Then one day, the hookers packed up shop and moved from their house into a mobile home. But they had one problem. They wouldn't have a basement, which means no space for a crate. So Cameron, the carpenter, had a solution. He built a box the size of a coffin, and he slid that box under their bed. For the next few years, Colleen Stan lived inside that box. She was only let out to be tortured, assaulted, or forced to do the housework. The rest of the time, she laid in the darkness, with nothing but air holes to breathe through. On hot days, the temperature inside that box would go above 100 degrees. She would just lay there sweating, her body weak from starvation. And above her, the monsters Cameron and Janice just slept in their bed. Seriously, right on top of her. Now, 2 young children also lived in the house, but they were completely unaware that there was a woman trapped under their parents' bed. Colleen began to lose hope. Maybe she would never escape, and maybe she would die in that very box. But the box wasn't even the biggest problem. More than the beatings, more than the abuse, she was afraid of the company. And you might be confused on what the hell that is. So, let me explain. You see, on top of all the abuse Cameron would inflict on Colleen, he also lied to her so she would never think of running away. He told her he was a part of a cult named the Company. The Company was a powerful underground cult that watched her every move. They knew where her family lived. I mean, they had her phone tapped, is what she believed anyways. If she tried to escape, they would come for her and then they would kill her family. And like you would expect, she lived in constant fear and she would not dare to piss Cameron off. So when Cameron handed her a master and slave contract and a pen, she signed without hesitation, believing it was her only way to survive. So ladies and box heads, she was no longer Colleen Stan. She was now Kay. She belonged to Cameron, and from that moment on, she was to call him master. And Janice was ma'am. Her body, her mind, her very existence belonged to the hookers. Cameron began to trust her actually. First, she was allowed out of the box for short periods of time. Then she was allowed to play in the garden, go for jogs, even eat dinner with the family. These small, controlled freedoms gave her the illusion of control, when in reality, she was still pretty much a prisoner. Then, in March of 1981, 4 years after Colleen was taken, Cameron did something completely unthinkable. I mean, this guy is seriously a psycho. The man let her visit her family. But whoa. Even this was a part of his twisted plan. The rules were very clear. She had to return and she couldn't tell them what was happening. Colleen obeyed. When she arrived home, her family was shocked. They hugged her. They smiled, laughed, and tried to reconnect with their daughter that they had barely seen for years. They even took a picture. In the photo, Colleen and Cameron stood side by side. He introduced himself as her fiance, but the family knew something was off. Colleen barely spoke. I mean, she was reserved and robotic. The girl had no expressions on her face. Her parents sensed something was off, but they were scared that if they pushed too hard, she would completely shut down. They just didn't want to lose her again. So they let her leave. She walked out of their home and back into captivity. The years passed, 7 in total. And then one day, Cameron made a mistake. He told his wife Janice that he wanted Colleen as his second wife. Ladies and box heads, that right there was the tipping point in this story. Janice had taken Cameron's twisted fantasies for years. She had even helped him keep Colleen imprisoned, but now faced the possibility of being completely replaced. And that's where she had enough. One night, she turned to Colleen and revealed the truth. The company isn't real. There is no cult. He's been lying to you so you don't leave. At first, Colleen couldn't process it. Everything that she'd been conditioned to believe, every fear that had kept her trapped, was all a lie. The world that she's been living in for the past 7 years shattered in an instant. Janice continued explaining how Cameron had made up the entire story. There were no men in suits listening to her phone calls, no secret organization, and no one coming for her or her family. For the first time in 7 years, Colleen felt something new, and that feeling was hope. Janice promised to help her escape. She wanted the girl gone. One morning, Janice secretly drove her to a bus station. Colleen stepped out of the car and hesitated, almost expecting someone to appear and stop her, but no one came. The world outside moved on as if nothing happened. She picked up a payphone. Dad, I need a ticket home. She was going back to Eugene, Oregon. Wait, but before she boarded the bus, she did something really unexpected. She called Cameron and told him she was leaving for good. She knew the truth. Cameron Hooker, the man who had enslaved her for 7 years, broke down on the other end of the line. Colleen hung up. She was free and she was going home. For months, she stayed quiet. Janice convinced her to not report Cameron. Colleen was scared of the shame, the embarrassment, and the trauma of reliving it all. She just wanted to move on and she just wanted to forget. But the guilt started to eat up Janice from the inside. She just couldn't keep the secret in any longer. She needed to tell someone who wouldn't get her in trouble. And so, ladies and boxheads, she went to church. She went straight for the confession booth and spilled everything to the pastor. The second the information was out of her mouth, she felt her shoulders relax for the first time in months. And just like that, she had leaked a secret the police had no chance of finding about otherwise. The perfect crime was now out in the open. And then the pastor called the police. On November 18th, 1984, Cameron Hooker was arrested. But this story didn't end there. During his trial, the police found out that he had done something even worse before Colleen. There was another girl, Marie Elizabeth Spanhake. Janice was the one who came clean to the police and revealed that Colleen was not Cameron's first victim. In January 1976, a year before Colleen, Cameron and Janice had picked up 19-year-old Marie while she was hitchhiking in Chico, California. She never made it home that day. Janice described how Cameron had tortured her, abused her, and eventually killed her. Unlike Colleen, Marie never got a second chance. Her body was never found. Without physical evidence, authorities could not prosecute Cameron for the murder, but they could put him away for what he'd done to Colleen. In 1985, Cameron Hooker was found guilty of kidnapping and sexual assault. He was sentenced to 104 years in prison. And for Colleen, the nightmare was finally over. She tried to rebuild her life. She worked, she traveled, she learned to trust people again. She even changed her name. But I wish I could say this was the only time in history a man like this existed. I'm about to tell you the literal worst kidnapping stories I could find on the internet. Starting off with the horrifying story of 14-year-old Elizabeth Smart, who spent 9 months kidnapped and chained up by a religious lunatic. The story begins on the night of June 5th, 2002. Elizabeth was sound asleep in her bed in the quiet, rich neighborhood of Federal Heights in Salt Lake City, Utah. She shared her bedroom with her younger sister, Mary Catherine. The house was silent. The family was resting peacefully without a care in the world. Then a faint noise broke the quiet. A window in the girl's room was forced open and a shadow crawled inside. A man carrying a knife moved across the room. Mary Catherine's eyes fluttering open. She froze, pretending to be asleep. The man approached Elizabeth's bed. A soft voice told her, "Don't make a sound. Come with me or I'll hurt your family." Elizabeth, who was terrified, did as she was told. She slipped on her shoes and followed the man out of the house. Mary Catherine stayed frozen under her blankets this whole time. She heard everything. Now she listened helplessly as the strange man took her sister away. 2 hours passed before she found the courage to move. She ran to wake up her parents, her voice trembling as she told them, "Mom, Dad, someone took Elizabeth." Her father, Ed Smart, rubbed his eyes trying to process what he just heard. He told Mary Catherine that she must have just had a bad dream. But Mary Catherine insisted she was telling the truth. She begged them to come with her. So Ed and his wife Lois went to check the girls' room. And that's when they saw it. The window screen had been cut open. They froze in complete fear. Time was slipping away. Lois grabbed the phone and called the police immediately. By the time the police arrived, over 30 people had flooded the house because of the commotion. And because of this, they were contaminating any potential evidence. The police questioned Mary Catherine, who described the man as having dark hair and hairy arms. She also told them that his voice sounded somewhat familiar, though she couldn't place where she had heard it before. 3 hours after Elizabeth's abduction, the authorities activated the Rachel Alert System, named after another Utah girl who had been kidnapped and killed. The news broadcasted Elizabeth's disappearance to the public, urging everyone to be on the lookout. Meanwhile, the parents were going crazy trying to backtrack for any clues. Who could have it been? Ed and Lois racked their brains for answers. They tried to make a list of even the most far-fetched suspects. Their home had been on the market recently, so could the kidnapper have been someone who toured the house? The police investigated every lead, going through the list of potential visitors. They also searched the family's computer, looking for signs that Elizabeth might have been in contact with someone online. But unfortunately, leads would come up empty. The next day, Ed and Lois Smart went on national TV. Ed's voice shook with emotion as he begged the kidnapper to bring his daughter home. Tears filled his eyes as he promised to do anything to ensure her safe return. Lois, holding back tears, spoke directly to her daughter. "Elizabeth, if you can hear us, we love you," is what she said. The nation watched as the Smarts poured their hearts out. Meanwhile, detectives knocked on doors across Federal Heights. Not a single neighbor had seen or heard anything unusual the night Elizabeth disappeared. Ladies and boxheads, they were running out of options. And so the mayor of Salt Lake City, Rocky Anderson, announced that the city would pay a $10,000 reward for any information leading to Elizabeth's safe return. The city was alive with volunteers looking to help. But a day would pass and there was still no news. Then another, and then another. With each passing day, the stakes were getting higher. Within just a few days, the reward had skyrocketed to $250,000. And then that's where the search effort had just exploded. Nearly 1,200 volunteers searched the area, desperate to find any trace of the missing girl. Dogs sniffed the ground in the Red Butte Canyon. Airplanes droned overhead as 20 volunteer pilots searched from the skies. "Elizabeth, Elizabeth, where are you?" But nothing would turn up. Then one day, a Federal Heights milkman called the police. He had a tip. Okay, so he claimed to have seen an older gray car driving slowly through the neighborhood before the abduction. He said the car looked suspicious, so he quickly reached for a notepad and wrote down the license plate number. The police obviously got excited. They finally had something to work with. And so they quickly entered the number into their system and prepared to locate the perp. And guys, there was only one problem. This license plate number didn't exist. It was a dead end. Meanwhile, the stress of the search began to take a toll on the family. Ed Smart was out on his feet all day looking for his daughter, only coming home for short breaks and naps. Eventually, after a few days of getting absolutely no rest, he finally fainted from exhaustion. And so, ladies and boxheads, he was rushed to the hospital. But he refused to stay put. The doctors had a hard time keeping him in bed for more than a few hours, after which he was finally back on his feet, running out to look for Elizabeth. While the Smarts continued their efforts, holding candlelight vigils, praying for their daughter's safe return, the police turned their attention to potential suspects. Suspect 1. Brett Michael Edmond. Witnesses reported seeing Brett in Federal Heights around the time of the abduction. The detectives set out to locate him, but the man was nowhere to be found. After several false sightings and tracking him across multiple states, the police finally found him in West Virginia. But it wasn't all good news. They found him hospitalized for an overdose and liver failure. Brett laid in critical condition. But luckily for everyone, he was alert enough to answer questions. The police conducted a thorough interview, but they had to clear him of any involvement because nothing suspicious came up. Suspect 2. With absolutely no new leads, the investigation turned to Richard Albert Ricci, a former handyman who had worked at the Smart home. Ricci had a grocery list of past offenses, including burglary, robbery, and even attempted murder. Ed Smart had hired Ricci the previous year, unaware of his past. Ricci had worked on the family's property in exchange for an old Jeep. When police questioned Ricci, he denied any involvement in Elizabeth's abduction. He also fully cooperated with the investigation. He didn't put up any fight.
Like you would expect, Richard Ricci was under intense scrutiny. The police had conducted an exhaustive search of his home. They ransacked his house and even dug up his yard. He gave blood samples and he even sat through 26 hours of interviews. He even surrendered his own vehicle to the authorities. Despite their best efforts, nothing related to Elizabeth was found. And yet the authorities felt like there was something off with this guy. But then after, Richard Ricci was forced with theft and burglary. The charges came from incidents in the Federal Heights neighborhood, including one involving the Smart family's home. Ed Smart confronted Ricci about the alleged theft of the jewelry and a perfume bottle, hoping he was talking to the perpetrator. Somehow Ricci denied his involvement and the cops couldn't find anything on him, so they had to let him go. Then in August 2002, Ricci's story took a tragic turn. While in custody, Ricci suffered a brain aneurysm. He was rushed to the hospital where doctors performed an emergency surgery to remove a blood clot and reduce pressure on his brainstem. But ladies and box heads, it was way too late. Ricci's condition kept getting worse. He lost his ability to speak, then he lost his ability to breathe on his own. After several days spent in pain, his family made the decision to remove him from life support. Ricci's death was a huge blow to the investigation. I mean, he was the prime suspect, and with him gone, the case was back to square one. As if these dead ends weren't frustrating enough, out came the opportunists looking to make some fast cash from the ongoing investigation. In November 2002, a dumbass from South Carolina named Walter Kenneth Holloway contacted the Smarts and the police claiming that he'd kidnapped Elizabeth. And the dumbass demanded $3 million for her safe return and threatened to hurt her if the money wasn't delivered. The police traced Holloway's location and immediately arrested him. The man clearly had no idea what he was doing. I mean, is he crazy? It didn't take long to figure out that Holloway was lying. I mean, he had no connection to Elizabeth whatsoever. And at this point, the investigation had begun to grow cold. Desperate for answers, detectives began turning to unconventional methods. No, seriously, it was time to trust the psychics. One psychic claimed Elizabeth's body was buried in a crypt in the foothills above Salt Lake City. Police followed the tips, searching the crypt and the surrounding areas. The only thing they could find was frustration, obviously. Other psychics insisted that she'd been killed within hours of her abduction and there was no way of finding her now. Like you would expect, this was going nowhere. The Smart family's hope was fading when a report came in, a potential breakthrough. A witness in Nebraska claimed to have seen a crying girl at a gas station. The description he gave fit Elizabeth almost perfectly. A girl between 12 and 14 years old sitting in a minivan and seemingly being held against her will. But after a thorough investigation, police found out that the sighting was unrelated. Once again, a lead that had turned into nothing. Then there was news of a crime in Salt Lake City. An 11-year-old girl was abducted from her bedroom, beaten and sexually, When doctors examined her, they discovered that every single bone in the middle of her face had been broken. Police arrested a suspect, Javier Sickler, a close friend of the victim's father. Javier claimed to have blacked out during the attack. But the question still lies, could this man have also taken Elizabeth? The police got to work, but just days later, they'd concluded that Javier had no connection to her abduction. Guys, it had been 4 months since Elizabeth had disappeared. The parents began to question if she was even going to come back anymore. The house had basically turned into a wake. But then, this is where something amazing happened. There was finally a real breakthrough, and I'm so excited to end this story off with something positive. And it came from the most unexpected source, Elizabeth's little sister, Mary Catherine. In October 2002, as Mary Catherine was going around doing her daily chores, it finally struck her. Remember how she had a feeling that she knew the kidnapper's voice? Well, in that exact moment, she realized who it was. It was Emmanuel. Emmanuel was an unemployed man her dad had hired to help with the roof repairs and with raking leaves. He had worked for the family for just one single day. She had her parents call the police immediately, but like you would expect, I think there was a little bit of hesitation. This was a child's claim after all. I mean, Emmanuel had only worked at the house for a short period of time. Could Mary Catherine's memory be accurate after so many months? Maybe she was imagining things because she really wanted her sister back. But there were no other solid leads coming in, so the police decided, why not? I mean, let's give this a shot. A sketch artist created a drawing based on Mary Catherine's description of Emmanuel. The sketch was released to the public in February 2003. Emmanuel instantly became a wanted man. Within days, someone recognized the man in the drawing. His real name was not Emmanuel. It was Brian David Mitchell. And that's the man the police were now looking for. On March 12, 2003, two couples in Sandy, Utah spotted Mitchell walking with a woman and a young girl. The girl was wearing a headscarf and sunglasses, but the couples felt certain it was Elizabeth. They called the police. Officers arrived quickly, but they questioned the trio. The little girl even gave a false name, Esther. But something felt unnatural in the way that she was behaving, and so they continued to ask her questions. The police had a suspicion she was lying. Clearly, she was scared of Mitchell and the woman with him. As the questions continued, the officers promised her that she was in safe hands. And finally, she admitted the truth. They had found Elizabeth Smart after 9 months in captivity. Elizabeth, the brave little girl, was finally ready to tell her story of the 9 months spent in captivity. From, well, the very beginning. The night she was abducted, Mitchell had led her to a hidden camp in the mountains outside Salt Lake City. There, she met his wife, Wanda Barzy. At first, Barzy acted like a mom. She offered emotional support and warmth. But as the days turned into weeks, she became less kind. Mitchell and Barzy were followers of some strange kind of religion, and they threatened to hit Elizabeth if she didn't follow their religious rituals. Mitchell declared himself a Davidic king, claiming he was commanded by God to abduct virgin brides. He said that Elizabeth was going to be the first of his many partners in his fight against the Antichrist, and so she was forced to marry Mitchell in a sham ceremony. That's when the worst of it began. Mitchell stripped her of any sense of identity by telling her that her name was now Esther. He then went on to repeatedly assault her, saying that it was all a part of his divine mission. Elizabeth was tied to a tree with a metal cable. Every day from then onwards, she was forced to drink alcohol, take drugs, and read explicit magazines. She was also starved and fed scraps. And Mitchell would visit her multiple times a day to hurt her. She thought she was gonna die. On the day she was rescued, her nightmare had finally ended. After their arrest, Barzy pleaded guilty to her role in the abduction and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. In 2018, she was released early, despite protests from Elizabeth herself, who claimed that she was one of the most evil women she had ever met. Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison. During his sentencing, Elizabeth faced him one last time. She said, "You took away 9 months of my life, but you will never take away my future." Okay, ladies and boxheads, I'm going to include some links to Elizabeth herself recounting the story. Seriously, she is one brave woman. And I wish I could say that this video didn't get any worse, but now let me tell you about the next story. The Chowchilla kidnapping. This is the story of how a school bus driver and 27 school children were buried alive in a failed kidnapping attempt. Yeah, it was July 15th, 1976. Ed Ray, a 55-year-old school bus driver in Chowchilla, California, started his usual afternoon route. 19 girls and 7 boys aged 5 to 14 years old. I mean, they were all excited, they were chatting, they were shouting. It was the second to last day of summer school. Ed Ray has been driving kids around Chowchilla for over 20 years. They loved him and he loved them back. Many of their parents and grandparents had even been his classmates growing up. But on this day, Ed's life and theirs would change forever. Ed was driving down a quiet, rural road under the burning hot California sun. Up ahead, something caught his eye. A white van stopped dead in the middle of the road. Ed frowned. He slowed the bus, looking for the van's driver. Was it broken down? Ed brought the bus to a stop, unaware that there was another van hidden nearby. Then the doors of the first van swung open. 3 men jumped out. Their faces were obscured by pantyhose, stretched tight like grotesque masks. Before Ed could react, one man stormed onto the bus and pressed the cold barrel of a gun to Ed's temple. "Move," the man ordered, his voice cold and calm. Ed's heart was racing, but he decided to obey. Ed stepped away from the driver's seat, and one of the masked men took over. The 2 other gunmen turned to the children.
The bus went silent except for the muffled crying of a few terrified kids. The man at the wheel steered the bus off the road into a dry canal. The once familiar landscape disappeared behind them. Inside the bus, things were getting tense. Some of the younger kids didn't fully understand what was happening. 5-year-old Monica Artery stared curiously at one of the men. The legs of the pantyhose on his head hung down like floppy rabbit ears. "Are you the Easter Bunny?" Her small voice cutting through the silence. Even in this nightmarish moment, Ed felt his stomach twist. This poor girl had no idea what was happening, but thankfully the gunmen ignored her. They didn't cause any problems for her. Then, at the canal, the gunman ordered Ed and the children off the bus. "Out!" Ed hesitated. The man raised his gun and Ed quickly followed the orders, helping the kids off the bus one by one. The dry canal floor was burning hot under their feet. 2 white vans sat, waiting. The gunmen grouped their victims together and shoved them into the backs of the vans. Ed tried to count the kids. His mind was racing. He needed to keep track of every single one of the kids. 1, 2, 3. The van doors were slammed shut, sealing Ed and the children inside the darkness. It was dead quiet and he couldn't see a damn thing. When his eyes adjusted to the pitch darkness, he saw the seats had been removed from the van, leaving only the bare metal floor. There was no food, no water, and the drivers didn't stop for anything. For the next 11 hours, the 2 vans rumbled ahead. The kids, cramped together, were now getting nauseous from the bumpy ride. Some of the younger kids had begun to throw up, while the other kids tried to keep them calm. One of them even suggested they sing to lighten the mood. Their voices trembled as they sang. "If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands." Except they weren't happy, not even close. So they changed the words of the song. "If you're sad and you know it, clap your hands." The song faltered as some of the kids broke into tears. Ed sat in silence, helpless and overwhelmed. He had no idea how to help them when he was freaking out himself. He checked his watch over and over, marking the hours. It was 3:30 in the morning when the vans finally stopped. The doors opened and a harsh light flooded in. "Out!" The gunmen yanked the doors open and dragged their captives out, one by one. The group had been brought back to a rock quarry in Livermore, California, nearly 100 miles away from Chowchilla. Ed squinted, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Under the faint glow of the quarry lights, something strange stood out. A van, but not just any van. This one was somehow buried underground, with only the roof and a small opening visible above the dirt. Ed began to wonder how someone could even have accomplished that. Then one of the gunmen shoved Ed forward, snapping him back to reality. "Name! Name! Name!" Another barked at the kids, forcing each one of them to say their names as they each handed over one piece of their clothing. The items were tossed into a pile. Ed's heart sank. Were they going to bury them alive? One by one, the kidnappers ordered the children down a ladder through the roof of the buried van. The older kids went first, helping the younger ones climb down into the darkness. Then it was Ed's turn. The space inside was cramped and dark. Dirty mattresses lined the floor along with a few jugs of water and boxes of food, if you could even call it that. Once everyone was inside, the kidnappers slammed a steel plate over the roof's opening. Ed felt his stomach drop. Then came the sound of dirt being shoveled. One scoop at a time, they were being buried alive. The younger kids start screaming. One child even fainted. Ed tried to calm them down, but his own panic was taking over. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. But the walls of the van seemed to close in around them. Ed was fighting back tears in his own eyes. Ladies and boxheads, for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure if he could protect the kids he cared for so much. Buried underground in the pitch darkness of the van, Ed Ray stared at the steel roof above him. His heart was pounding. He was sure of one thing: the roof wouldn't hold out for too long. Dirt was piling on top of the steel plate and the weight was slowly starting to press inward. The air inside was hot and suffocating. Ed looked around at the terrified faces of the 26 children huddled in the buried van. They were crying, shivering, and clinging on to each other. Then, suddenly, 14-year-old Mike Marshall had suddenly stood up. It went quiet in the van, all eyes were on him. He looked like he had something to say. He took a deep breath, put on a brave voice, and then loudly announced to all the other kids that he wasn't going to just sit here and die without trying. Seeing this, Ed's own spirits were suddenly lifted. He had to believe he could get out of there for anything to happen. And so he quickly came up with a plan. Ed and Mike got to work. He told the older boys to help him gather the dirty mattresses scattered across the van. Together, they stacked the mattresses on top of one another, creating a makeshift tower that reached the roof. Ed held the stack steady as Mike climbed to the top. The kids below passed him wooden slats from the broken bed frames inside the van. "Push as hard as you can," Ed told him. Mike jammed the slats into the edges of the steel plate covering the roof, but the plate would not budge. Ed climbed up to help. He quickly realized that it was being weighed down by something extremely heavy. This something would later turn out to be 2 massive tractor batteries, weighing about 100 pounds each. The weight was crushing. Ed's arms were beginning to throb. He was getting tired. His muscles screamed in protest as he pushed against the plate with all of his strength. Sweat poured down his face. The kids below passed water up to him and Mike, trying to keep them from collapsing from the heat. For hours they pushed. The roof continued to sag further and further, the weight of the dirt pressing even closer. Then, just as hope was starting to fade, the plate shifted. Dirt spilled down into the van as Ed and Mike finally broke through. A gap appeared in the roof. Ed quickly lifted one of the older boys through the hole and told him to start clearing away the dirt. One by one, the children were lifted through the opening and out of the buried van. Finally, the last child climbed out and the older boys reached back down to pull Ed up. 16 hours after being buried alive, Ed and the children emerged into the early morning light. They were gasping for fresh air, trembling but still alive. The group stumbled toward a quarry guard shack near the Shadow Cliffs East Bay Regional Park. Inside, a very confused night watchman stared at the disheveled group. 26 children and one exhausted bus driver. What on earth happened? Ed told him to call the police immediately. "We were kidnapped." When police arrived, like you would imagine, they were stunned. Officers were quickly dispatched to the quarry, where they found the buried moving van. Peering inside, they saw the dirty mattresses, empty water jugs, and discarded food containers. The sight sent chills down their spines. Investigators immediately began piecing together the details. One thing was for sure clear. The kidnappers had to be people who had access to the quarry. The moving van had been carefully buried, and the operation would have taken significant time and effort. Their first lead was the quarry owner's son, 24-year-old Frederick Newhall Woods IV. Frederick was well known in the area. Police quickly learned that he spent an unusual amount of time at the quarry. Within days, they tracked down Frederick and his 2 accomplices, brothers James and Richard Schoenfeld. The trio was arrested, and that's when all the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. 3 perpetrators, all coming from rich families, but had somehow managed to fall into a lot of debt. Desperate for money, they came up with this horrifying plan. Kidnap a bus full of children and then demand a ransom. In custody, James explained their twisted logic. They needed multiple victims to get multiple millions. And they picked children because children are precious. The state would be willing to pay ransom for them. They don't fight back, they were just vulnerable. The trio had been inspired by a short story called The Day the Children Vanished by Hugh Pentecost. They had stumbled upon it in a book at the local library. Jackpot. The trio had studied the book over and over to make sure they didn't miss anything. They thought they had just cracked the perfect crime. But when they finally went out to test it, their plan fell apart almost immediately. The kidnappers had planned to demand a $5 million ransom from the state. But as luck would have it, the phone lines at the Chowchilla Police Department were jammed with calls from worried parents. They just couldn't get through, so the kidnappers had decided to wait. By the time they saw the news, it was way too late. Ed Ray and the children had escaped and their faces were plastered all over national television. The dumbass trio's grand plan had failed. At trial, Frederick, James, and Richard all pleaded guilty to charges of kidnapping for ransom and robbery. They were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Over the years, the kidnappers went in different directions. Richard Schoenfeld was paroled in 2012. James Schoenfeld followed in 2015. Frederick Woods, the dumbass fourth, considered the ringleader, remains in prison to this day. Haha, that puts a smile on my face. Anyways, on August 22nd, 1976, just over 1 month after the escape, Chowchilla held a celebration for Ed Ray. The children and their families gathered to thank the man who had saved their lives. Although Ed Ray and the children survived, the trauma from this incident lasted for decades. And sadly, many of the children developed severe anxiety, panic attacks, and reoccurring nightmares.
These stories I'm about to tell are some of the worst plane hijackings in history. And let's start off with Indian Airlines flight IC-814. This first hijacking lasted for 7 whole days, during which one of the passengers was brutally stabbed to death and then had their body thrown out like trash. It's December 24th, 1999. A seemingly normal day. And we're here at Tribhuvan International Airport in Kathmandu, Nepal, with 179 innocent passengers and 11 crew members ready to take their nice 2-hour flight to, well, New Delhi, 1639 IST. Indian Airlines Flight 814 was in the air. Just like the start of any other flight, the flight attendants were going down the aisles serving each passenger with complimentary refreshments, not knowing that they had just served the passengers who were going to take this whole airline down. 5 men, starting with Ibrahim Attar, Shahid Akhtar Sahid, Sunny Ahmed Kazi, Zahur Mistry, and Shakir were on board IC-814. These men were members of the Harkat-ul-Mujahideen, a super well-known terrorist organization that had ties to the likes of Osama bin Laden. One of the hijackers, wearing a mask, holding a revolver and a goddamn grenade in his hands, got up from his seat and followed behind Anil Sharma, one of the flight crew members, to the cockpit of the plane, 1653 IST. Now the hijacker has the revolver aimed at Captain Davy Sharon's head from behind. All of a sudden, he feels a gun pressed against his head, and a random voice from behind saying that this flight is being hijacked. And guys, we'll get into the demands of the hijackers a bit later. But it only took 3 minutes for the Delhi air traffic control to catch wind of what was going on. They managed to send out a distress signal alerting the authorities of the hijacking. In the main cabin, the other hijackers got up from their seats and demanded that the crew take away the food that they have served to the passengers at the beginning of the flight. The crew members didn't know what else to do, so they complied. The hijackers then went from seat to seat down the aisle, screaming and demanding that all of the men be separated from the women and children on the flight. They also ordered that all passengers wear blindfolds. And like you would expect, the passengers were absolutely terrified at this point. Many of them hesitated to follow orders, which is when the hijackers looked at them and threatened them with explosives if they questioned anything that they were saying. The hijacking was going according to plan. Well, at least the hijackers thought. 1804 IST. In the cockpit, the captain grabbed his radio and begged the Indian air traffic control to convince the Pakistani air traffic control to let them land. Why, you may be asking? Because the Pakistani ATC refused permission for the plane to land in Lahore. The problem was that Indian Airlines Flight 814 only had 1 hour of fuel left, which meant that this whole plane was about to come crashing the hell down. Unfortunately, the hijackers overheard the captain talking to the Indian ATC. The men took action to this and began to threaten that they would execute 10 passengers if the plane landed in India instead of the Pakistani airspace. The hijackers hesitantly allowed the captain to land the flight at the Amritsar airport, an Indian airport that is close to the Pakistani border. 1844 IST. The plane starts its descent towards Amritsar. As soon as the plane landed, the captain quickly grabbed the radio and requested that the refueling be done as quickly as possible. The captain turned to the hijackers and handed them the radio, begging them to say something. But guys, they refused to communicate with the local police. Almost 30 minutes went by and the plane was still not refueled. The pilot turned to the hijackers and could see them visibly getting upset from the delay. But their response was anything but normal. They turn around and storm out of the cockpit into the main cabin. They walk over to the passengers and aggressively pull 7 of them out of their seats. Then they drag these poor passengers to first class, shoving them into the seats and tying them up. 2 of the passengers were Satnam Singh and Rupin Katyal. Then, without any hesitation, the hijackers pulled out a knife. They brutally stabbed both of them in the chest. I mean, seriously, repeatedly stabbed them. Katyal slowly but painfully bled out in his seat as his blood sprayed everywhere, gasping for air as his lungs filled with blood. And in just a few minutes, he was pronounced dead. He was forced to leave behind his wife Rachana, who was actually on the plane with him. Just sick. The hijackers stormed back into the cockpit, declaring that they have just killed some passengers on board. In a panic, the pilot picked up the radio and made contact with air traffic control 4 times. Screaming that the hijackers had already started killing the passengers, he even threatened to take off from the airport without the refueling, if it meant that it would save the lives of everyone on board. He was terrified but willing to try and save these innocent people. A refueling Bowser was finally dispatched, but it was initially parked to the side. As the plane moved, it was ordered to block the plane from being able to take off. Here's the thing, the hijackers knew that the refueling process would prevent them from taking off. So they turned to the captain and angrily pointed their revolver to the back of his head. They seriously demanded that he takes off immediately. Keep in mind, in first class, 5 passengers were still in their seats with their hands bound, hoping and praying that this whole situation would end soon. Just take a second to imagine how horrified they must be. The hijackers are threatening that they would execute these passengers in first class if the plane didn't take off right now. Again, trying to save the lives of the innocent passengers, the captain listens, despite receiving no clearance to take off. (1947 IST). Captain Sharan is distraught. Did he save the lives of the passengers or did he just unknowingly kill everyone on board? He radios air traffic control.
We are all dying.
The plane was headed to Lahore. Now, if you remember from earlier, the Pakistani ATC had already denied IC-814 from landing in Lahore. But that didn't stop the captain from picking up his radio and hoping that this time it would be different, because a man on board had already died. And well, they were denied again. The plane flew over the Lahore airport and the hijackers looked outside the window, beginning to fill up with rage, as they saw the lights and navigational aids suddenly turn off, preventing them from landing safely. The fuel was running dangerously low. The captain instantly regretted not allowing the plane to refuel, realizing that now he might have to attempt a crash landing, potentially killing everyone on board, including himself. With fear in his eyes, he looks down at the highway near the airport, accepting the fact that the plane would crash multiple cars, most likely killing innocent drivers. The plane is about to make an emergency landing when suddenly, the Pakistani ATC turned on the lights and navigational aids, allowing the plane to finally land at the airport. 2001 IST. Indian Airlines Flight 814 lands in Lahore. And just as the plane lands, suddenly the runway lights went out and the hijackers realized that they have just been tricked. Why? Because without the lights, the pilot couldn't take off from the airstrip. As the hijackers rushed over to the windows to see what was happening, the Pakistani forces surrounded the goddamn plane. Yep, they were completely trapped. The hijackers started to panic, realizing that their plan had just become unraveled, which is when they finally agreed to release some women and children that were on board. But this time, the Pakistani authorities denied them permission to release anyone. The plane was then refueled and allowed to leave Lahore. 2232 IST. Inside the cockpit, the hijackers demanded that the captain fly to Kabul. However, there was one major issue. When the captain radioed to request permission to land in Kabul, he was informed that the Kabul airport lacked night landing facilities. He sets the radio down and turns to the hijackers and pleads to them that it's not his fault. As the plane flew more west, almost every Gulf country closed their airspace, preventing the plane from landing anywhere. The captain thought that this was it. He had no words. The passengers were crying while holding each other, terrified, not knowing what would happen next.
IC-813, you are all clear to land at Al Minhad Air Base in Dubai. Over.
December 25th, 1:32 IST. The plane has landed in Dubai. This time, the UAE authorities wasted no time and they demanded to speak with the hijackers. The demand was the release of 27 passengers in exchange for fuel. Like you would expect, the hijackers caved in because they just didn't have any fuel. The dead body of Katyal and injured passengers like Satnam Singh were also released. Alright, even though the plane was now in Dubai, the Indian authorities wanted to attempt a rescue by Indian forces, but the UAE authorities refused permission. They didn't want to get into a dangerous situation. The UAE authorities then sent catering trucks to feed the passengers inside, and to also further delay the plane from taking off. But guess what? These hijackers didn't even care about feeding the passengers, and they decided to let them go even longer without goddamn food. These poor, innocent passengers haven't eaten in hours, all while being held hostage. So then the hijackers turned to the captain, pointed their gun behind his head, and demanded that he takes off. This time, the captain thought that he should crash the plane into a building on the runway so that the plane couldn't physically take off. Just as he was about to crash the plane, he remembers that the plane was filled with fuel and the whole plane could explode, literally disintegrating everyone on board and everyone around. 6:20 IST. The airplane takes off from Dubai. The hijackers decide it's time to head to their final destination, Kandahar, Afghanistan. Now, here's where things get even sketchier. Remember, this is 1999. Afghanistan is under the rule of the Taliban, and the international community isn't exactly on good terms with them. But for the hijackers, Kandahar is the perfect place to hunker down. With the Taliban in control, they're pretty much untouchable. When the plane lands in Kandahar on December 25th, the Taliban steps in, offering to mediate negotiations between the hijackers and the Indian government. Yeah, right, Taliban mediators, that's like asking a fox to guard the henhouse. But India doesn't have much of a choice. The plane is now in a hostile territory, and any military action could lead to a massacre. So over the next 5 days, the situation drags on. The Indian government is scrambling to find a solution, but the clock is ticking. And the hijackers are growing even more dangerous with every hour they have to wait. And of course, food, water, and other resources are running low. Let's just say the tension is rising. And well, the hijackers made it abundantly freaking clear. Either the Indian government meets their demands or more people will die. Back in India, the government is facing an impossible decision. The hijackers want 3 militants released from Indian prisons. And these weren't some small-time criminals. Like, this isn't some free my boy, he didn't do nothing wrong. No. These were dangerous men. Like full-on terrorists. And their release could lead to even more terror attacks in the future. But on the other side, refusing to comply could mean the deaths of 149 innocent people. Their time was running low, the clocks were ticking. By December 31st, the Indian government was out of options. After nearly a week of negotiations going back and forth, they make the impossible decision to give in to the hijackers' demands. In a controversial move, they agreed to release 3 violent and notorious terrorists: Maulana Masood Azhar, Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh, and Mushtaq Ahmed Zargar. These men are flown to Kandahar where the swap goes down. As the prisoners are released, the hijackers let the remaining hostages go. The passengers, some of whom are barely alive after days of captivity, are finally free. For nearly a week, they were held hostage as they watched each other suffer in terrible conditions. They were terrified, hardly ate any food or water, and didn't know if they would even survive this whole situation. And guys, the hijackers, on the other hand, slipped away and were never caught. So what exactly happened after the dust settled? Well, for one, those 3 released militants didn't exactly go on to lead quiet lives. Maulana Masood Azhar, went on to found Jaish-e-Muhammad, which has been responsible for multiple terrorist attacks in India, including the 2001 Indian Parliament attack and the 2019 Pulwama attack, which killed 40 Indian soldiers. As for Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh, he played a key role in the 2002 kidnapping and murder of American journalist Daniel Pearl. The decision to release these militants sparked a national debate. Has India done the right thing by negotiating with terrorists? Or had they set a dangerous precedent? Who's to say? I mean, I just know that I wouldn't want to make that call. Boxheads, in the comments, tell me what you would have done. Next, we have Aeroflot Flight 3739. This next hijacking is about a family who tries to escape from the Soviet Union, but their hijacking results in the deaths of 9 people. It's March 8th, 1988. Aeroflot Flight 3739 is sitting on the tarmac at Irkutsk Airport in Serbia. The plane is preparing for a short flight to Leningrad, which is now called St. Petersburg, Russia, by the way, for anyone that was curious. And honestly, this day was nothing special. I mean, it was just another typical day in the Soviet Union. It's supposed to be an easy flight for the 76 passengers and 8 crew members on board. I mean, this plane included families, flight crew, and unfortunately for them, a group of hijackers. Little did anyone know this routine flight was about to spiral into a disaster that would end in bloodshed and became one of the most infamous hijackings in Soviet Union history. However, it wasn't just about the hijacking or getting control of the plane. It was more about the desperation from the hijackers. They wanted to escape so badly and gain their freedom from the Iron Curtain Soviet Union, who had control over the lives of millions of people in the USSR. Let me explain that some more before we get into the hijacking details. It's important. We're in the late 1980s and the Soviet Union is going through what you might call a rough patch. Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev's reforms are shaking things up in ways the country hasn't seen in decades. On paper, it sounds nice, opening the government, giving people more freedom, and allowing for some economic reforms. Cause communism. But in reality, the USSR is a tightly controlled, authoritarian country where people don't exactly have the freedom to come and go as they please. You must get a written approval to take a dump kind of stuff. And so that's where the hijackers come in. Meet the Ovechkin family, with the most Russian names ever. Vasily, Dmitry, Igor, and Alexander, and 7 other siblings. They played music and they were actually in a band together. That will be important soon, I promise. And they were the kind of family that had no intention of just sitting back and watching their lives waste away under the Soviet rule. They wanted out so badly, but let's just say the Soviet Union didn't exactly make it easy for them to just pack up their bags and leave. So the Ovechkin brothers came up with the plan. Hijack a plane and use it to escape to the West. The free people. And they weren't exactly doing this alone. They roped in their younger siblings and even their mother to be a part of the grand escape. Yeah, you heard me right. Mama Bear was on it too. Yeah, Mom, we know Mother's Day is coming up. We signed you up for an all-inclusive spa. Here's the catch. It's not in the motherland. Grab a gun. It's March 8th and the mother along with 10 children of the Ovechkin family have boarded Aeroflot Flight 3739. The flight then takes off at 12:40 p.m. There are 76 passengers on board, so it's not completely full. The flight takeoff is fine, everything's going smooth sailing for the passengers and nothing suspicious seems to be happening. Yet. Passengers sit in their seat, read a book or something, or whatever the hell you do in the 80s on a plane. The Ovechkin brothers start looking around the plane nervously, knowing that they were about to turn this peaceful flight into a whole ass shit show. They were waiting for their moment, and for about an hour they decided that it's almost time for action. They whisper amongst each other and it probably went something like this. Bro, you ready, bro? Yes, bro. I'm ready, let's do it, bro. Get it? Because they're brothers? Anyway, I need you to listen to this because it's pretty damn crazy. Once they were all ready, they grabbed one of their instrument cases and unzipped it. They pulled out a double bass, a musical instrument if you didn't know. And then the brothers grabbed sawed-off shotguns and explosive devices. Yep, from inside an instrument. The brothers hid weapons inside a double bass before boarding the flight. After all, the family was in a band together and they were kind of known locally. So the security at the airport let them through with the big ass instrument case. The Ovechkins are now armed and dangerous, holding shotguns and grenades. The passengers start to notice those weapons and, well, panic ensues. The Ovechkins quickly get up from their seats and rush to the front of the plane. They barge in, aiming their weapons at the flight attendants. One of the Ovechkins then hands a note to a nervous flight attendant. Let me tell you what the note read. Proceed to London, do not descend. Otherwise, we will blow up the plane. You are under our control. The flight attendant nervously holds the note, shaking and scared for their life. In a panic, they sprint to the cockpit and warn the pilots of the danger everyone is in. Alright, so the hijackers' goal is to divert the plane to a Western country. Specifically, they want to land in London or Sweden. Anywhere that was far, far away from the Soviet Union. The flight crew was caught off guard but tries to keep calm, knowing full well that the Soviet policy doesn't allow for much wiggle room when dealing with hijackers. I believe their policy is get good. But with the Ovechkins armed and dangerous, the situation in the cockpit is quickly spiraling out of control. The Ovechkins are aiming their shotguns at the flight crew, making their demands known. They are desperate to leave the USSR and will do anything to get somewhere else, like hijacking a goddamn plane filled with innocent people. The hijackers believe if they can get the plane over the border, they'll be home free, embraced by the West as political refugees. But here's where things start to go sideways. The Soviet authorities, now fully aware of the hijacking, aren't about to just let this plane full of citizens land in a Western country, no matter what the hijackers want. The pilots keep flying west, but soon they see that Soviet fighter planes are following them in the sky, with an order to shoot the plane down if it crossed international territory. Yeah, these guys are literally insane. They would do anything to stop their citizens from escaping. At this point, the plane is headed towards Finland, or at least the hijackers think so. In reality, the pilots are flying to a Soviet airbase, Vovchenko, in an attempt to avoid international conflict. However, planes need this little nifty thing called fuel, and it was running out. With their low fuel levels, they're not going to make it to Finland. But the Ovechkins don't want to give up. With the guns pointed to the pilots' heads, they continue to threaten the crew, insisting they head west. More like desperately begging. However, it becomes clear that time is running out for the Ovechkins. Here's the thing about the Soviet Union in the 80s. They didn't exactly negotiate with terrorists or hijackers, or anyone for that matter. As the plane gets closer to Leningrad, the Soviet military is already putting together a plan to storm the aircraft the moment it lands. At this point, the passengers are on edge, aware that they're caught in the middle of a deadly situation. And the Ovechkins, they're getting more frantic, knowing that their plan is quickly falling apart like a Jenga tower. As the plane descends, the Soviet special forces are on the ground and are visible outside of the plane windows. They're waiting for the plane to land. I'm sure the passengers inside the aircraft were ecstatic to see that this whole situation would be put to rest. But the hijackers, yeah, not so much. The plane gets lower, lower, and lower, and they finally touch down in Leningrad. The plane lands in Pulkovo Airport, where the KGB, which ladies and boxheads is kind of the Soviet Union's version of the CIA, has mobilized elite troops to handle the situation. These aren't your average security guards. They're highly trained soldiers ready to storm the plane and end the hijacking by any means necessary. The Ovechkins start to panic as they realize they are completely trapped in the plane. Nowhere to go, nowhere to hide from the KGB. With no other options, they give an ultimatum. If the plane isn't refueled and allowed to take off again, they'll start killing the hostages. But the Soviet authorities aren't budging. In fact, they cut off all communications with the hijackers, basically playing a game of chicken with them. The Ovechkins are in and over their heads, and they know it. At 9:45 p.m., after hours of waiting, the Soviet special forces storm the aircraft. What happens next is just pure chaos. As the troops board the plane, the shooting starts. The Soviet military exchanges fire with the Ovechkins and their shotguns. Realizing the end is near, the Ovechkins continue firing and try to detonate their homemade grenades. The frantic passengers are caught in the crossfire. They scramble around the plane to protect themselves from the gunfire and the sudden explosions. Those poor people were definitely in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's a bloody, terrifying scene. Between gunshots and an explosion, bodies of the innocent hostages are dropping to the ground, injured and bloody or choking on the thick smoke. Minutes pass and the brutal shootout finally comes to an end. The dust from the explosion clears and it finally seems safe for the Soviets to move in. To their horror, they spot 4 innocent passengers lifeless on the ground, covered in blood and horrifying wounds, including 2 children. As for the hijackers, well, 5 of the hijacking Ovechkins had died in the shootout, while the others survived. Most had to kill themselves during the exchange of gunfire, not wanting to face the consequences of their actions. But ladies and boxheads, Olga and Igor Ovechkin had survived. These 2 remaining hijackers were tried and sentenced to 6 and 8 years in prison. Alright, here's where things are a little bit, weird. After she got out, Olga was then beaten to death by her boyfriend. Man, this whole thing is just a brutal end to a desperate attempt at freedom. This video is about children who brutally killed their own families and will probably make you think twice about ever having kids. So, let's go in raw. Jasmine Richardson. This first child killer was a 12-year-old girl who slaughtered her entire family so she could run away with her 23-year-old werewolf boyfriend. Yeah, I'm not even kidding about this. It's April 2006 and 12-year-old Jasmine is going through her little emo rebel phase that apparently every teenager went through back then, spending way too much time on the early internet. But outside of her internet emo persona, she lived a seemingly normal, happy life with a great family. They all lived in Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada. No, I'm not even kidding. This place is really called Medicine Hat. Mark and Deborah Richardson were the parents of Jasmine, as well as her 8-year-old little brother Tyler. Those who knew the Richardsons described them as an average, peaceful family, including Jasmine, who, well, we'll get into why we already know that's not true. Like I said earlier, Jasmine was spending a little bit too much time on the internet, especially for a 12-year-old girl. She signed up for profiles on typical websites of the time like MySpace, but also on more unknown sites like vampirefreaks.com. Vampirefreaks.com, people. Yeah, pretty weird, but like she was literally 12 years old. I probably would have just watched box set videos when I was 12, but hey, to each their own, I guess. Subscribe. On these sites, Jasmine was posting images of herself wearing goth clothing, heavy eye makeup, and she would even pose with fake guns. It was clear that she had quite an interest in the punk lifestyle, which unfortunately leads us to the first steps of the brutal murders of her parents and her little brother. But why? How does being goth lead to her entire family being goddamn murdered? Well, you little boxhead, let me tell you about a rather interesting emo guy that Jasmine was about to meet. With a few of her friends, Jasmine would regularly attend rock concerts. And at one of these shows, she meets a 23-year-old man. His name was Jeremy Steinke. Jeremy was a high school dropout who lived in a trailer park with his mother, was a very, very avid weed smoker, and was also abused as a child. Yeah, all of this sounds like a recipe for goddamn disaster, people. But hold on, get this. He genuinely described himself as a 300-year-old werewolf. Yup. And he was dead goddamn serious too. No, I mean seriously, this guy even wore a vial of blood around his neck at all times, telling people that he enjoyed the taste of it. Damn, and I thought I was freaky. Anyways, Jasmine introduces herself to Jeremy as a 15-year-old, rather than her true age, 12 years old. Not like that's any better, especially to a 23-year-old goddamn man. But as we know, the werewolf dude over here didn't really care, and seemed to like the fact that Jasmine was kind of young. Bro, this guy would have been a great goddamn Minecraft YouTuber. Nope. Hey, don't attack me. You know them Minecraft YouTubers be getting. They be crossing some lines. After the two meet in person, they begin chatting online nearly every day. They grew super close and even became involved romantically. As an older guy, Jeremy found it easy to pursue someone of Jasmine's young age. You goddamn creep. On the other hand, Jasmine just wanted to feel a connection and was desperate to have her first love. I mean, come on, all of us were like that when we were young. I'm still waiting. Jeremy, being the old and wise goth that he was, heavily influenced and even pressured Jasmine into keeping up with her dark, gothy punk aesthetic. And of course, Jasmine complies. She begins to double down on her emo-ness, becoming even more involved in creepy sites online. And she even started wearing more revealing punk clothing in her real life. As a result, her family and the people around her start to notice this sudden shift in Jasmine's personality. Mark and Deborah Richardson, Jasmine's parents, became suspicious with their daughter's behavior and decided to do some snooping, as any parent would. And in the weeks leading up to their murder in April 2006, they discovered that a 23-year-old man had been in contact with their young little daughter. Obviously, they would freak the hell out. I mean, who the hell wouldn't? They just found out that a weird, creepy-looking older werewolf guy was not just talking with, but very inappropriately involved with their little girl. So Jasmine's parents immediately banned her from contacting Jeremy ever again. No calling, no texting, no rock shows, absolutely goddamn nothing. And Jasmine, being the typical teenager that she was, saw this as her parents separating her from her love life. I hate you, Mom. You're ruining my life.
Don't worry, honey, it's just a phase. She'll grow out of it.
They were goddamn wrong. Knowing how this story ends, it's pretty obvious that Jasmine and Jeremy's relationship didn't end there. Remember that little site vampirefreaks.com? Well, the two forbidden lovers actually found a way to communicate through it. Using fake-ass usernames, they carefully continued to chat through the website, leaving Jasmine's parents completely unaware. But Jasmine wasn't off the hook just yet. Her parents were keeping a very close eye on her outside life, always knowing where she was or who she was with. They even drove her to and from school, all with one goal in mind: no meeting Jeremy. The fact that the two wouldn't be able to see each other without her parents knowing infuriated the both of them. And this, ladies and box heads, is when the planning of the Richardson family murders began. Through their little freaky vampire website, Jasmine messages her boyfriend saying, "So, I have this plan. It starts with killing them and ends with me living with you." Jeremy, who was probably delighted to hear this, accepted her crazy plan. Together, they conspired through online messages to murder the Richardson family in their own goddamn home. April 22nd, 2006. A heavily intoxicated and drugged up Jeremy makes his way to the Richardson family home in Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada. He's dressed in all black and a ski mask so no one sees him. I wonder what TV show he got that from. Our original buddy. Jasmine secretly lets Jeremy inside the house and then retreats back upstairs to her bedroom. I guess she didn't want to see the murder of her family that she literally planned out. All alone now, Jeremy makes his way into the basement of the house. Not very quietly though, because he is super drunk. Alright, fine, boxheads, I'll give it to him here. This guy was definitely more of a werewolf than a goddamn ninja. Anyways, Jasmine's mother, 48-year-old Deborah Richardson, was in this basement, doing a load of laundry like it was any, typical kind of day. Jeremy sees her and remembers the plan that he and his girlfriend constructed. Every Richardson must die tonight. Suddenly, Jeremy emerges from the shadows of the dark basement holding a 6-inch folding knife. Deborah screams at the top of her lungs as this masked man lunges at her and attacks her. Unfortunately, she would succumb to her wounds after being stabbed 12 times in the chest by Jeremy. You heard me right, people! 12 goddamn times! Because of Jeremy's loud attack and Deborah's piercing screams, the rest of the family had been woken up. Jasmine's father, 42-year-old Mark Richardson, immediately grabs a screwdriver and makes his way down to the basement in a hurry, worried that his wife might be in trouble. Little did he know what was coming. Mark rushes down to the basement and finds blood everywhere. On the walls, on the floor, and as soon as he looked over, there he saw a random man in a ski mask, standing over his dead wife with a bloody knife in his hands. Scared, Mark turns around and starts sprinting up the stairs. But he wasn't fast enough. He feels the hands of Jeremy grabbing him back down, followed by the pain of a knife plunging into his back. Jeremy stabs Mark 9 times in the back. But Mark doesn't let up easily. He fights to save not only his life, but the lives of his children as well. With all of the remaining strength that he had, an adrenaline-fueled, terrified Mark tries his hardest to injure his attacker in any way possible. He desperately hits Jeremy and even tries to gouge his eyes out, but none of it works. This intoxicated, drugged-up werewolf man doesn't seem to feel any pain. Eventually, Jeremy grabs his knife and stabs Mark again, this time in his chest and abdomen area. Before Mark takes his last breath, he is able to weakly mutter one word to Jeremy. Why? Not even knowing that this masked killer was his daughter's secret boyfriend. Jeremy then replied, "Because your daughter wanted it this way." Mark's eyes then shut forever, dying in the pool of his own blood. Jasmine's father suffered 13 stab wounds to the front of his body and 9 wounds to his back at the hands of Jeremy. So now we got 2 dead Richardsons in the basement. But as we know, the Richardsons were a family of 4, and if Jasmine planned it, then that leaves 1 Richardson left, 8-year-old Tyler. While Jeremy was in the basement dealing with Jasmine's parents, part of their twisted plan was for Jasmine to distract her little brother. In Tyler's upstairs bedroom, the siblings are waiting for Jeremy to handle his business in the basement. But of course, little Tyler did not know what was going on. While carrying the dripping, bloody knife used to kill Mark and Deborah, Jeremy made his way up the stairs to meet his 12-year-old girlfriend and eliminate their last target. When Jeremy enters the bedroom, he hands Jasmine the same knife that he used to murder her parents. He then forcefully grabs and pins down the 8-year-old. While he's held down on this bed by this grown man, Tyler cries and pleads for his life to his sister. I mean, seriously, what kind of person could listen to the cries of an innocent child, much less their own brother, and still want to murder them? Gosh. Tyler can't move, his whole body is restrained, and he is terrified. Imagine a grown, masked man holding you down while your own big sister does nothing to protect you. This poor little kid probably had no idea that his sister was behind all of this. Well, until she held the knife over him. Yeah, this girl is absolutely disgusting. So with zero care for Tyler's pleading, Jasmine then drives the 6-inch knife into little Tyler's chest. But he actually survives this blow to the chest. The boy was making gargling sounds and was still able to move around. If Jasmine had any remorse in her heart, she could have changed her mind right there and then. She could have called it all off and saved her little brother's life. But no, this evil little girl had her mind made up. Her whole family had to die that night. Jasmine then hands the knife back to her boyfriend. Jeremy takes the blade and slashes the little boy's throat wide open, killing him instantly. The blood from the slash sprayed all over the kid's toys in his room. Talk about goddamn disgusting. Some reports even say that in an attempt to defend himself from his sister and her boyfriend, the 8-year-old actually grabbed a toy lightsaber. How could someone even do this? The kid tried to defend himself with a lightsaber. Like, this is just a terrible story. In the end, Tyler Jacob Richardson was stabbed 5 times, with a severe laceration to his throat. With this death, that left the entire Richardson family members dead, besides one, of course. I mean, it was exactly what Jeremy and Jasmine wanted. A life free of annoying parents who in reality just wanted to protect their daughter and make sure she was safe. After the murders were finished, the 2 lovers fled the area without any remorse, leaving a house full of dead bodies behind. They hitched a ride from a friend and just tried to get as far away from the house as possible. It wasn't until the next day when the 8-year-old child of a neighbor saw Deborah's dead body through a window. That's when the police were called. The police initially suspected a home invasion and the entire family had been killed on the night of April 22nd. But as the cops walked around the house, they came across family photos and started noticing a face in the photos who, well, wasn't dead in the house. The police quickly realized that there was a 4th missing member of the Richardson family. An Amber Alert was sent out for Jasmine Richardson and her name was everywhere. on the news, of course. People were actually concerned for her safety, thinking that she might have been abducted by home invaders. No one would have imagined the real goddamn story. Once the police had found Jasmine's computer, they were able to read through her messages and found a graphic drawing of her family dying. And ladies in box heads, that's when they began to put together the real story. As the police read further and further into the messages, they discovered that Jasmine was actually the mastermind behind these awful, disgusting, brutal murders. They found where she first brought up the idea to her boyfriend and how he so eagerly complied. They now knew that she wasn't a victim. So, the police set out to find and arrest the two lovers. And because of the Amber Alert, Jasmine and Jeremy were spotted about 80 miles away, in Leader, Saskatchewan, Canada. They were seen casually hanging out with friends, cuddling, kissing, bragging, and acting like nothing bad had happened while eating in a restaurant. So, the police were called and the two were arrested. In court, Jasmine Richardson was convicted of 3 counts of murder. However, because she was only 12 years old at the time of the crime, the maximum punishment she could have served in prison was only 10 years. So, boxheads, she was actually released in 2016 and she has been a free woman ever since. And fun fact, but not really fun, Jasmine Richardson is the youngest person to ever be convicted of a triple murder in Canada. As for Jeremy Steinke, well, they didn't go as easy on a grown-ass man. Excuse me, werewolf. He was found guilty for 3 counts of murder and sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences in prison. I guess you can say Jeremy would never see a full moon again, huh? Bad joke. All of this happened because of goddamn vampirefreaks.com. Not only could Jasmine have been killed by a 23-year-old werewolf boyfriend her damn self, but she didn't even think about what the sketch website could have done with her personal information. I mean, have you ever just signed up to a random ass website and then bam, your whole mailbox is just completely spammed with stuff you literally just searched up? This is because companies gather your data, aggregate it, and trade it. Seriously, it shouldn't be allowed whatsoever in my opinion, and all of these companies have a scary amount of information about yourself, and as a little boxhead myself, I don't want people to know what I search up in my free time. Wait. And I don't think anyone should. The good news is you can get it removed, and the bad news is that it would probably take you years. Literally years. And I don't got time for all that. Here's a solution for you. You sign up to Incogni. They're the sponsor of this video. And you can just sit back, relax, and let them take care of it. I personally signed up for Incogni last week and they've already removed my information from 101 lists. If you guys sign up with my link in the description, you get an amazing offer of 60% off. So, definitely take advantage of that. It's not going to get any better, I think. So, use code BOXHEAD at incogni.com/boxhead to get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan. Again, that's code BOXHEAD at incogni.com/boxhead to get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan. Now let's get back to the video. Erin Caffey. This next child killer orchestrated the vicious murder of her whole family using guns and samurai swords. Yeah. March 1st, 2008. 4 members of the Caffey family are sound asleep in their beds when 2 men break into their home. These men would then carry out brutal attacks on the family, resulting in the murders of the mother and her 2 young sons. A gruesome murder plan that was later discovered to be ordered by the Caffey family's own 16-year-old daughter, Erin. But before we get into more graphic detail, let me give you some background information, as we typically do. It's the fall of 2007 in the small town of Alba, Texas. Not to be cliche, but it's one of those quiet towns where everyone knows each other and nothing crazy ever really happens. Alba was full of tradition, God-fearing, religious families who never missed church on a Sunday, including the Caffeys, a typical southern family of 5. 41-year-old Terry Caffey and 38-year-old Penny Caffey were the parents of 3 children. 13-year-old Matthew, 8-year-old Tyler, and their eldest child, 16-year-old Erin Caffey. Erin was a great student, regularly went to church, and had the voice of an angel, they say, as she would usually sing in the church choir. She seems to be a good kid on a path to success. So now you're probably wondering, if everything was all sunshine and rainbows for Erin Caffey, what exactly went wrong in her life and gave her these murderous thoughts? How in goddamn hell did she end up killing her goddamn family? Well, it all starts out when Erin meets her soon-to-be murder accomplice, Charlie Wilkinson. Just about 5 months before the murders, Erin meets 18-year-old Charlie while she's working a shift at her part-time fast food job. He was a couple years older than her and apparently Erin's type. So the two developed a romantic relationship that moved pretty goddamn quickly. Erin and Charlie spent all of their time together, becoming basically inseparable. And only after a couple of months of dating, Charlie actually proposed to Erin with a promise ring. Thankfully, they didn't actually get married, but it goes to show how head over heels they were for each other. Meaning they would do anything. And I mean seriously anything for one another. Now, this is where things start to take a dark turn. Erin's parents were not very fond of their daughter's boyfriend. He was antisocial, rude, and was the cause of Erin's rebellious phase over the past few months. Their once sweet and ambitious daughter had become closed off to them, and even began slipping up in school. Erin's parents decided that school was far more important to Erin's life than her boyfriend. Reasonably so. So, they demanded that Charlie and Erin break up. But oh boy, they did not realize just how in love this couple really was. Charlie was infuriated with the idea of having to break up with his girlfriend and suggested that Erin actually run away with him. However, Erin had a much more sinister idea in her mind. Erin wholeheartedly believed that the only way for her and Charlie to stay together was if they somehow murdered the entire Caffey family. That's right, the entire family, including her innocent younger brothers. So, Erin tries convincing Charlie of what they have to do in order to be together, and well, it actually works because Charlie agrees to help kill the whole family. But they knew they wouldn't be able to get the job done by themselves. I mean, there were 4 members of the family to kill, and Erin didn't want to do any of the killing by herself, which would leave Charlie to kill 4 people on his own. So Erin and Charlie did what any normal psychopathic teenagers would do and convinced even more people to help them with their plan of killing the entire family. They recruited one of Charlie's friends, 20-year-old Charles Wade, to help them with the actual killing part of the plan. Then they had Charles's girlfriend, 18-year-old Bobby Johnson, act as the getaway driver. Yeah, let's just fast forward to March 1st, 2008, at around 3 a.m. Erin's parents, Terry and Penny, were sound asleep in their bed. That is until their bedroom door slams open, disrupting them from their sleep. Before Erin's parents even knew what was going on or who'd even opened the door, 2 men forcefully rushed into the room. Confused and terrified, the Caffey parents screamed in fear for their lives, unaware of the horrors that were about to unfold. Without any hesitations, the intruders started firing .22 caliber rifle bullets at the defenseless Caffey parents. 1 second, the parents were peacefully sleeping, and the next, they were in a pool of their own blood, fighting for their lives. Terry, Erin's father, is shot multiple times in the chest as he throws his body over his wife to try and protect her. The attackers then shoot Terry in the face, causing him to fall off the bed and onto the floor. Unfortunately, Terry wouldn't be able to protect his wife as he lays in the pool of his own blood on the floor. He tries mustering all the strength in his body to get up, to speak, to do anything, but he can't. Terry had been shot a total of 11 times and was severely injured. Meanwhile, his wife Penny just laid on the blood-soaked bed as the killers continued to load her body up with bullets. But as scared as she was, she didn't give up easily either. In fact, the attackers got super frustrated when Penny just wouldn't die from the bullets. And remember when I mentioned a goddamn samurai sword at the beginning of this section? Well, this is when that sword is used. One of the attackers takes the sword and aligns it with the middle of poor Penny's throat. Already covered in gunshot wounds, Penny has no strength left to defend herself. Knowing what he must do next, the man slowly lowers the sharp blade closer and closer to his victim. He then plunges the blade right into her neck and slashes it out of the side. Blood sprays everywhere. This brutal action nearly decapitates the poor woman. Unfortunately, Penny Caffey had no chance of survival from this brutal attack. She died right there in that bloody bed at the hands of Charlie and Charles. But Erin Caffey, her own daughter, was really the one with blood on her hands. Despite being shot 11 times, the father, Terry Caffey, was actually still alive on the floor and heard the whole thing. I mean, can you even imagine having to witness the truly evil murder of your wife and hardly clinging on to the life of yourself? And to make things worse, the attackers were now headed upstairs toward the Caffey children's bedrooms, ready to do the same thing to Terry's children. While falling in and out of consciousness, Terry could hear the loud footsteps of the two men going up the stairs. He desperately wanted to save his kids' lives, but he was way too injured to move fast enough and was slipping in his own blood. Upstairs, the men quickly burst into 13-year-old Matthew Caffey's bedroom. Immediately, Matthew recognizes one of the assailants as Charlie, his older sister's boyfriend. And after hearing the traumatic screams of his mother and father just a few moments before, Matthew knew exactly what was coming. Completely terrified, Matthew begged and pleaded with Charlie to spare his life. He cried as he begged him, "No, Charlie, please don't do this," and asked him, "Why are you doing this?" The men, unfazed by the child's begging, shot him right in the face and his neck. Silence. After killing Matthew, they rushed over to the next room to kill the youngest kid in the family, 8-year-old Tyler Caffey. God, these people are just disgusting. Tyler had been hiding in the closet of his older sister's room. This poor, innocent kid had heard all of the attacks that came before him, so he hid, praying that he wouldn't be found. Tyler sat in that dark closet alone, terrified, knowing that no one in his family would be there to protect him. Could you just imagine the fear that this kid probably felt? Sadly, Charlie and Charles eventually found Tyler in that closet. They grabbed the boy out of the closet, pushed him onto the ground, and oh god, this is hard to say. They took turns stabbing their samurai swords into the 8-year-old's body. Satisfied with their sick killings, Charlie and Charles then went around the house collecting any valuables or cash they could find. Erin and Charlie actually planned to pay their accomplice Charles with the $2,000 that was stashed somewhere in the Caffey home. Once the job was done, of course. Then the killers doused the home with lighter fluid and set the whole damn place on fire. Yeah, surely that wouldn't draw any attention to the horrific crimes that they just committed there. Anyways, remember how I told you that Terry Caffey, Erin's father, had actually survived? Yeah, well, he wasn't free to go just yet. This poor guy had to fight his way out of a burning building after being shot 11 times, right after his youngest son Tyler was just killed. Terry realized that his whole family was probably dead. He even assumed that his daughter Erin had been killed too. We'll get into that in a second. But Terry couldn't just handle this idea of his family being gone. He stops fighting and just, well, gives up. He collapses into his own pool of blood on the bedroom floor and falls unconscious. However, thanks to that fire Charlie and Charles had set in the house, Terry wakes up. His body feels hot and he's no longer just choking on blood, but on smoke too. He realizes that the house is on fire and if he doesn't get out now, he will die this time. With all of the strength he could possibly muster, Terry drags his body through the bedroom and pulls himself out of a window. Thankfully, Terry and Penny's bedroom was only on the first floor. As the house is literally burning down behind him, Terry crawls almost a quarter of a mile to his neighbor's house. With 11 gunshot wounds and thinking his whole family was dead, he was fighting to get to safety for one reason. That was more than just his own survival. For the simple fact that he knew the identity of one of the killers. Remember when Terry's older son Matthew was killed? Remember how he was specifically begging Charlie not to kill him? Well, Terry actually heard all of that and just knew. Right then and there, he knew that his daughter's boyfriend was the goddamn killer. And Terry would do anything to make sure he was identified. When he arrives at his neighbor's house, Terry tells his neighbor, Tommy Gaston, that Charlie did it. Tommy frantically calls the police. Listen to this.
Alright, sir, I have a few questions that I need to ask you, okay? We're going to get you an ambulance. I need you to stay on the line with me, okay? Are you with the patient now?
Yes.
How old is he?
He's 41.
Is he conscious?
Yes.
And is he breathing?
Yes.
Okay. When did this happen?
I don't know, just a little bit ago, and we've also got a house on fire out here.
And the house is on fire? Is the person who shot him still nearby, sir?
Yes, he's right here at me.
You shot him?
No, I didn't. I don't know any more details. I've got to hang up and help him.
Sir, I have to ask you these questions. Okay, they're en route. Is there any serious bleeding?
Yes, he's bleeding.
Okay, is he completely awake?
Yes, he's awake.
Okay, what part of the body was injured?
I don't know, but I've got to go.
Sir, I need to know where he was shot.
Do what?
I need to know where he was shot at.
I don't know.
So while all of this is happening in the Caffey family home, where the hell is the mastermind herself, Erin Caffey? Well, she was just waiting in the car with her getaway driver, Bobby Johnson. Erin, in an impatient tone while just waiting in the car, can they hurry up? How long are they gonna take in there? Once Charlie and Charles had finished up the murdering part of the plan and drove away in the car, Erin literally shouted, "Holy shit, that was awesome." And no, I'm not making that line up. She had actually said that about her family being murdered. To all my little box heads listening to this, guys, don't ever grow up to be this girl. Anyways, they all fled to Charles's trailer to get a good night's sleep. After, a casual extermination of an entire family because of Terry's 911 call not long before. The police were searching for Charlie Wilkinson. It wasn't long after the murders that they found him holed up in Charles's trailer. They arrested Charles thinking that would, be the end of it. What they didn't expect was to find a 16-year-old blonde girl also in the trailer. Yep. That girl was in fact Erin Caffey. You would think that Erin knew that there was no escaping at this point, right? Well, the plot thickens again. Her boyfriend had been arrested, the police were going to interrogate him, and their master plan would be investigated. But nope, for some reason Erin had the high hopes that she could actually get away with the murders. So when the police found her, Erin tried to play it off like she was kidnapped, unsure of where she was. She claimed that she'd been drugged and had no idea that her family was just killed. And honestly, it kind of worked. The police felt sympathy for her, thinking that she was genuinely a lost, kidnapped little girl who had just lost her entire family and that she was just freaking out. But hey, we all know after watching this section of the video, that's definitely not goddamn true. After running multiple tests on Erin, they discovered that she was lying about being drugged, and in fact, knew a lot about the murders. That sympathy? Yeah, that was all gone now. The police had stopped viewing Erin as a poor little victim and instead embraced the idea that she could be a suspect. Then she blamed Charlie for the initial idea of the plan, while Charlie and the rest of the crew put all the blame on Erin. I mean, it was her idea. Till this very day, Erin Caffey denies ever being the mastermind behind this crime. The four involved in the Caffey's family murders all pleaded guilty in court. Bobby Johnson, the getaway driver, got 40 years in prison. Charles Wade and Charlie Wilkinson both were sentenced to life without parole. And the puppet master herself, Erin Caffey, was sentenced to life in prison with the chance of parole after 25 years. Now, Wilkinson and Wade were actually going to face the death penalty for their crimes. Let me actually know in the comments what you think about the death penalty. Are you guys for it, against it? I just want to know. It wasn't until none other than the surviving victim, Terry Caffey himself, testified for the killers of his family to not receive the death penalty as a punishment. Terry was a man of God and strongly believed in forgiveness. Yes, this man had his whole family killed and had it in his heart to forgive them. Man, I can't say I would be the same. Jake Evans. This next child killer was inspired to murder his family after watching a goddamn movie. And once he actually did it, he called the police on himself. Meet 17-year-old Jake Evans, a kid who was about to shoot his mother and sister to death in their home in Aledo, Texas. Jake was born on May 22nd, 1995 to Daryl and Jamie Evans. He was a middle child and their only son. He had three sisters, 15-year-old Mallory, his older sister Audrey, and the eldest Emily. Growing up, Jake was never described as a kid with violent tendencies. He was quiet, respectful, and never gave anyone the impression that he would ever do something so evil. So why the hell did he kill his mom and younger sister? Well, it all started just a few hours before the murders took place. It's October 2nd, 2012, and Jake is relaxing and eating some lunch in front of the television in his Texas home. He was watching the slasher horror movie Halloween. You know, the one with Michael Myers. Specifically the 2007 Halloween film directed by Rob Zombie. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Why is this even important? Well, this movie actually features a 10-year-old version of the infamous fictional killer Michael Myers. Young Michael goes around killing multiple members of his family with zero remorse. This absolutely fascinated Jake. He was so intrigued with the fact that a young kid could kill people without any emotion. Hey, Jake buddy, you know Michael Myers wasn't a real person, right? As he watched the film for the third time just that week, he couldn't help but imagine what it would be like to kill someone. Or someone even in his family. Jake believed that he'd be just like Michael Myers after murdering someone. No remorse, no emotion, so he decided to test that theory out. That night, as Jake sat in his living room, he constructed a plan. His initial idea was to murder his whole family the next morning. Like the entire family. He wanted to kill his younger sister, then his mother, then his oldest sister, then his grandparents, and then his other older sister. Man, I almost ran out of breath there. But yeah, this kid had quite the plan. Anyways, after coming to terms with the fact that he would kill his entire family within the next 24 hours, Jake then goes upstairs to his bedroom to watch some good old Family Guy. Then, at around 4:15 a.m., Jake's 15-year-old sister Mallory knocks on his bedroom door. She asks him if he wants to watch a movie with her. Jake declines. He was upset with his younger sister because she had made some racist remarks earlier that day. He even called her hold on, let me get the exact words here, racist for the things that she said, which I will definitely not be repeating because I kind of like my job on YouTube. Yeah, it's kind of confusing. Jake may have liked murderers, but he did not like racists. This conversation seemed to upset Jake quite a bit. Once his sister left, retreating to her bedroom next door, Jake rushed down the stairs. He opened the door to his parents' closet and was looking for something specific. And there it was, his dad's blue foldable knife. And just in case you were wondering, Jake's dad was away on a business trip while all of this was happening. It's why Jake never mentioned him in his murder plan. Anyways, Jake grabs the knife and quickly rushes back up the stairs and to his bedroom. With the knife in his hands, Jake paces around his room, thinking intently about his plan. He contemplates ending his sister's life right then and there. He didn't want to wait all the way to the morning like he had planned. The thought of causing his sister pain right now was just too strong. So Jake exits his bedroom and walks over to the room next door. At 9:30 p.m., he knocks on the door of his sister's bedroom and now asks if she wants to watch a movie. Jake fake happy and smiling. Hey sis, I changed my mind, let's watch a movie. Mallory confused. Okay, what's behind your back then? Oh, nothing. The two head down to the living room and sit on the couch like it was just any other night. They turn on the TV and throw on a movie in the back. Jake continuously runs his fingers over the knife hidden in his pocket while the movie plays in the background. He seriously couldn't bring himself to pay attention to whatever was happening on the TV screen. Over and over, the intrusive thoughts of killing his sister just flooded Jake's mind as he sat right next to her on that couch. And after thinking really hard about it, he decided not to. Well, not yet at least. Jake believed that his sister didn't really deserve to feel any pain when he killed her. So he decided to switch his knife out for a different murder weapon, a gun. And not to mention, at this point, Jake knew that if he impatiently killed his sister, he would have to kill the other victims soon too. This included Jake's mother, who was the only other person in the house with Jake and Mallory at the time. Jake gets up from the couch while the movie continues to play and makes his way downstairs. He heads to his closet and retrieves a revolver. Jake had stolen this gun from his grandfather at an earlier time, then stashed it away in this closet. For a while, Jake paces around the house, trying to come to terms with what he was about to do. He plays with the gun, opening and closing the cylinder of the revolver as he, thinks. And well, Jake accepts the fact that he was gonna do it. He is 100% sure he is going to kill his family tonight. 11:15 p.m. In the upstairs hallway of Jake and Mallory's bedrooms, Jake stands outside of his younger sister's bedroom door with the revolver hidden behind his back. He knocks at Mallory's bedroom door, but this time it wasn't to just ask to watch a movie. When she opens the door, he tells his sister that she needs to go downstairs to help their mother with something. As the 15-year-old girl walks past her brother, she turns her back to him. Jake raises his arm and aims the revolver, putting his own sister in between the sights of the gun. Mallory sees her older brother out of the corner of her eye. Terrified, she questions Jake, hoping that he's just playing some kind of sick joke on her. She tells Jake that she was getting kind of freaked out by him and that he should put the gun down. But that didn't stop the psycho from pulling the trigger. Jake shoots his own sister in the back. She falls to the ground, screaming in pain. A pool of Mallory's blood begins to fill the floor of the upstairs hallway. Jake stands over Mallory's injured body and looks down at her, wanting to make sure that she really dies. Jake raises his arm again, aiming the revolver at his sister yet again. He puts another bullet into his sister, this time in her head. But for some sick reason, that wasn't enough for Jake. There was still someone else in the house that he had to kill. Jake quickly makes his way downstairs to his mother's study. He flings the door open and sees his mother standing in the room. His mother, Jamie Evans, stood there confused and scared. She had heard the previous gunfire upstairs and could only expect the goddamn worst. She was actually about to investigate the loud and unexpected shots right before Jake arrived. This time, without any hesitation, Jake lifts the gun and starts firing in his mother's direction. He shoots her 3 times. The images of Jake's sister and mother laying in the pools of their own blood constantly replayed in Jake's mind. He couldn't believe what he had just done. He paced around his bedroom, screaming, shooting bullets into random objects, and just flat out freaking the hell out. The kid knew he messed up. To make things worse, he could hear gargling sounds coming from the hallway. Yeah, his little sister Mallory wasn't dead yet. Having to go through it all again, Jake returns to his suffering sister, who is barely holding on to her life on the hallway floor. As she chokes on her own blood, he fires another bullet into her head, this time killing her. And just to make sure his mother was also dead, he put another bullet into her head as well. Yeah, Jake couldn't do that again. He tested the theory that he would feel no remorse if he murdered someone, and it wasn't true. I feel like it was kind of obvious that, dude, you're not Michael Myers, you're Jake Evans, you're going to feel bad. Anyways, he felt awful about his actions and called off the rest of his plans. Jake knew that he wouldn't be able to go through with the murders of his grandparents and older sisters. So he picks up the phone and dials 911. As he stands in the Evans family living room, somehow completely calm and emotionless, Jake tells the operator everything. But ladies and box heads, the way this kid confessed was almost as scary as the crimes themselves. I mean, just listen to this 911 call.
I just killed my mom and my sister.
What?
I just killed my mom and my sister.
You just killed your mother and your sister? How did you do that?
I shot him with a .22 revolver.
And what is your name?
Jake Evans.
Jake Evans was then arrested after fully admitting to the murders that took place in his home. In a plea agreement, Jake was sentenced to 45 years in prison for 2 counts of murder. He would be eligible for parole about halfway through his prison sentence. To make things even crazier, the Evans family forgives Jake for his actions, after claiming that he would never murder again and he understands the consequences of his actions. His family fully believes him and supports him. These are some of the most dangerous women that have ever lived. And ladies and box heads, let's start off with an Italian woman who slaughtered her victims, melted their bodies in acid, and then turned their flesh into soap, and their blood into tea cakes, all in the name of motherly love. Her name, Leonarda Cianciulli. But before we get into the killings, let me tell you about how an innocent woman turned into one of the most ruthless killers the world has ever seen in the first place. Leonarda was a widow living in a remote village in southern Italy. A mother who gave birth to 17 children with only 4 of them surviving. No, I'm not even kidding, she suffered 3 miscarriages. 10 more of them didn't even reach their youth. As a result, Cianciulli genuinely believed she was cursed, and honestly, if I was in her scenario, I wouldn't think any different. But here's where it gets a little crazy. A fortune teller also confirmed her suspicions. Yeah, no, fine guys, let's go trust a fortune teller because they always know what's going on. Anyways, the fortune teller told her, you will marry, you will have children, but they will all die. That right there is when Leonarda's smile completely faded. See, back then in rural Italy, superstitions weren't just mumbo jumbo. They were taken pretty serious, it was almost like a way of life. People feared the evil eye, trusted fortune tellers as if, they were scientists. Seriously, people believed curses could destroy families. All that to say, it's not a surprise that she would be super overprotective of her 4 children. And when her eldest son was enlisted in World War II, Leonarda couldn't do much about sending her favorite, the golden child, away to war. She panicked and became convinced that the only way to protect her son from anything bad happening to him was through, get this, sacrifice. Human, gosh darn sacrifice. And that's where Virginia Cacipo comes in. Now, Virginia used to be somebody. A former soprano, a star gracing the grandest stages of Italy. But by the time Leonarda came across her, Virginia was nothing but a ghost of her former self. She was aging, penniless, and desperate for a second chance. Leonarda, she saw that. She promised to return Virginia to her glory days. The promise was in the shape of work as the secretary for a mysterious impresario in Florence. Anyways, by then, Leonarda had already mastered the art of luring in desperate women. She instructed Virginia not to tell a single person what she was doing for her. Virginia listened. It's like telling the box head watching this video to subscribe. Of course you're gonna do it. Anyways, let's now fast forward to September 30th, 1940. The Second World War was at its peak and Leonarda was worried sick about her child when she heard knocking coming from the door. Leonarda opened the door knowing full well it was Virginia who had come to her asking for help. Her plan was working. She smiled, inviting the former soprano into her home. That knock right there would prove to be Virginia's last. But anyways, Virginia was very hopeful. She blindly trusted Leonarda to deliver her this new job. The new job came with the promise of fancy gigs, nobility, maybe even a comeback. All she had to do was tell no one. Leonarda gave her a piece of paper to write her goodbyes for her friends and family. She should have already kinda knew what was coming, but imagine being so cold to have planned something this deadly. As Virginia wrote her goodbye letters, Leonarda offered her some wine. They toasted to new beginnings. Just as Virginia turned her back to the table, bang! Leonarda brought down an axe. Blood was everywhere. There was an axe in the skull. To make things even worse, Virginia was still alive. Yeah, that's right. Leonarda's blow had not completed the job. Not that it mattered. She showed no remorse whatsoever. So she struck again and again until Virginia's lifeless body stopped moving once and for all. But this right here was not the end. For Leonarda, this was only the beginning. She dragged the body towards her large copper cauldron. And let me tell you what happened next. She started butchering the body. And then Leonarda took the pieces and threw it into the pot. 7 kilos of caustic soda and continuous stirring. Stripped off the bone, it was dissolved. Okay, so you would imagine that Leonarda would at least throw away the fat that rose to the top, right? Wrong. She scooped it out, dried it in the oven, added cologne, and then here, get this, and then turned it into soap. Yeah, you heard me right. Soap! Creamy soap, as confessed by Leonarda herself. As for all of the blood that was there, well, Leonarda had a plan for that too. She baked it all into tea cakes. Yep, tea cakes to be eaten. And then what do you think this psycho did with the tea cakes? Oh, she just gave it to the neighbors and guests so that they could eat it. Leonarda Cianciulli wasn't just a killer. This psycho was a cannibal. She even described Virginia as sweet just like sugar. Ugh. Worst of all, she didn't even feel bad about any of this. Because Leonarda genuinely believed that she saved her son. That Virginia saved her son. But here's the thing, Virginia wasn't her only victim, she was her third. Before her came Faustina Seti and Francesco Soavi, 2 lonely middle-aged people. Both of them also believed that Leonarda was helping them restart their life. And all of them met by the same fate. Somehow no one around suspected a damn thing. Maybe it had something to do with the fact that the first 2 victims were not public figures. Virginia's death, however, caused a ruckus. It was different. It had a lot of drama. Virginia wasn't just a middle-aged woman. She was a soprano, a star, a public figure. People noticed she was missing and many got suspicious. Among them, Virginia's own sister. She simply refused to buy the sudden disappearance. Who would? She asked questions, and then she went to the police. Eventually, all of the questions led to Leonarda Cianciulli. As a result, the police showed up at Cianciulli's residence. They asked her many questions, but they didn't believe the whole story or the mumbo-jumbo she was spewing. Somehow, she did avoid suspicion. But then, one of the police officers asked her a question that certainly gave it all away. The police believed the murder had been carried out by Leonarda's son. And there was no way she was letting her son get blamed. And that's when she confessed to it all. In fact, her funky ass was almost proud of it. When the officers pointed out details, Leonarda corrected them on many occasions. Eventually, justice was served. It was delayed. But Leonarda showed up in court wearing black with an arrogant smirk. The press had dubbed her as the soap maker of Correggio. Anyways, people just showed up to see her, to catch a glimpse of the woman who made candles, cookies, and soap out of corpses. It was the trial of the decade. Verdict, you guessed it, guilty. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison and 3 more in a criminal asylum. Chillingly, that fortune teller that we mentioned in the beginning of this story had made another prediction. Great, woman! Great! Thanks for coming back! Thanks for coming back and giving one of your other insightful thoughts! She ended up actually being right though. She said that in your right hand I see prison, in your left an asylum. Leonarda Cianciulli died in 1970, in the asylum from cerebral apoplexy, leaving behind destroyed families and horror stories. Now, something I found kind of interesting is all of her tools, like the knives, the cauldron, are all being preserved behind glass in Rome. Like, I am pretty sure you can go check out these things right now. Talking about the most dangerous woman in the history of mankind, you can't not mention the woman who was feared by Pablo Escobar himself. Ladies and boxheads, I'm talking about Griselda Blanco. And she went by many names, often called the Godmother or the Black Widow. And this right here is her story. Griselda was born in Colombia in 1943. She grew up in the slums of Medellin, quite possibly the most dangerous place on earth at the time. She was surrounded by poverty, violence, and corruption. Blanco didn't only witness brutality, she was molded by it. She learned it, then perfected it herself. According to many sources, cause guys, it was the 1940s, 50s, come on. We don't know exactly for sure, but her first murder was apparently committed at the young age of 11 years old. All because a family refused to pay for their son she kidnapped for ransom. That moment possibly set the tone for the rest to come. By the 1970s, Griselda had relocated to the United States, Queens, and then Miami. Anyways, no, she wasn't there to chase the American dream. The plan was to conquer it, with a little bit of that white dust, cocaine. Back in the 70s, Miami was a powder keg, a playground for the cartels, and people knew Griselda. After all, she wasn't just another player, she was the architect, the mastermind behind the first major pipeline from Colombia to the United States, controlling hundreds of smugglers, fleets of planes, even children as mules. People feared her for many reasons, her reach, her wrath. Griselda's fear was the perfect tool. If you disrespect her, you're dead. Betray her, you're dead. Disloyalty? Dead. Oh, and I'm not just talking about any type of death, not quick, clean hits. Nothing could help you if you crossed the Godmother. Griselda's modus operandi, or to make it really simple here, method of operation, was motorcycle drive-by shootings. 2 hitmen, 1 motorcycle, 1 machine gun. It's simple, you pull up, you spray bullets, and you disappear. Pure chaos. And in Miami, it's a war zone. At this time, it was called the cocaine cowboy era. Bodies dropping daily, and Griselda was the one behind most of them. What made her truly ruthless was her ability to separate feelings from work. If you work? Can you even call it that? She wouldn't only order hits on former allies or enemies. Griselda killed her own sugar daddies. Husbands. Yes, husbands. Not 1, not 2, 3. Is the name I mentioned earlier making more sense? That right there is how she got the name the Black Widow. Man, get the Marvel movie out of your head, we're not talking about that. Anyways, Griselda had enough men in her life. She needed obedience. If you crossed her, you didn't live to tell the story. She once ordered the killing of a business rival, which is quite common in the world of bloodshed, right? Well, wait until you hear the full story. Griselda ordered the hit at a child's birthday party. The target was there with family. Kids laughing, balloons swaying in the breeze, parents cracking open a beer and watching their little ones. Griselda, she didn't care though. Her orders were clear and her sicarios opened fire. And that's when chaos erupted. Screams filled the air. 4 dead, including a 2-year-old caught in the crossfire. No remorse, no apologies. Just another message for the rest. By the 1980s, Blanco Funky Ass was responsible for over 200 murders. And that's on the conservative side, according to many experts. So naturally, you gotta ask yourself, what brought her demise? Well, it wasn't a rival, nor the DEA. It was a phone call. In 1985, a tapped phone line was enough to crumble Griselda's massive empire. Her movements have been tracked, the deliveries led the DEA to her location. The Queen Pin was arrested in California, charged with murder and drug trafficking. And when the Queen of Cocaine showed up in court, it was a sight to behold. Her hair done, chin up, designer clothes. None of that would help because on February 17th, 1985, Griselda's funky ass was found guilty and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Wait a second. Hold on, let me check my notes again. Am I reading that right? How the hell she only get 15 years? Whatever, then things got worse. Former hitmen turned on her. So did her former lovers. Walls were closing in, then came the biggest blow of all. Her son cooperated too. Her own baby. As a result, Griselda pled guilty 20 years in federal prison. She served her time quietly, but the legend never faded. In 2004, Blanco was released and deported to Colombia, where she would return to her hometown, hoping for a life of peace and quiet. But the past never forgets, neither do enemies. Let's fast forward to September 3rd, 2012. A regular afternoon, Griselda's walking to a nearby butcher shop. It's broad daylight. She doesn't notice the man on the bike, which is kind of ironic after all, that's her own signature. 1 bike, 2 bullets to the head. Her body hits the floor. Just like that, Griselda Blanco died the same way she killed so many others. Execution style, in public, daylight, and also no mercy. Next is the chilling story of Myra Hindley, the other half of the infamous duo responsible for the Moores murders. A cold-blooded killer who used her innocent face to lure children in to their deaths, with the help of her evil partner. Hold on, and then the pair would bury their victims on the bleak and unforgiving hills of Saddleworth Moor, in the desolate north of England. I'm seriously telling you, Myra's crimes shook the whole world. But to truly understand the darkness in her heart, our story has to begin in Manchester, in the year 1942. That's when Myra was born, to working class parents with a rough home life, an abusive and alcoholic father, strict Catholic upbringing, and shaped by violence. For her cruelty, it wasn't really shocking, it was almost expected. The way she grew up, her sense of right and wrong became twisted. Somewhere along the way, Myra stopped flinching at horror completely. Actually, despite all of that, in many ways, she was kind of a normal teenager. She loved poetry and was fiercely loyal. But there were some strange signs. From idolizing Nazi Germany to her obsession with violence itself. Myra even kept a scrapbook filled with articles on murders and crimes. Then she met him, Ian Brady. Intelligent, brooding man, sharp-tongued, twisted mind. They met at work, where Myra was a typist and Ian was a stock clerk. From work colleagues, the two would become everything for one another. And that's where Brady started to shape her mind. Poisoned her with crazy, insane thoughts. The funky dude started gifting her books on sadism. Hitler, Marquis de Sade. And Myra, she ate it all up. He whispered fantasies about the perfect crime. And again, Myra listened. Not only that, and then she helped him do it. She agreed to become the bait and Ian agreed to do the rest. Who was their first victim? 16-year-old Pauline Reed.
On July 12, 1963, Myra was driving in her own neighborhood when she came across Pauline. As a part of the plan, Myra asked the teenager to help her search for a lost glove on the moors. Naive and innocent, Pauline just said yes. She got into the van, never to be seen alive again. On the moor, Ian was waiting. What follows next is not exactly for the faint-hearted, so ladies and box heads, get ready. She was beaten, sexually assaulted, and not just by Ian, Myra participated too. And then the poor girl was finally murdered. In fact, she was left alone with Pauline too after Ian went to find a spade to bury her. Then they buried her in a shallow grave, and no one suspected a thing. Pauline just became another missing child. But the two were just getting started. Only 3 months after the horrors of July 1963, Myra and Ian struck again. Who was their next victim? John Kilbride. And you want to know what's interesting about this kid? He's 12 years old. He was a happy boy who worked at his local market. November 1963, Myra lured the young boy with the promise of a bottle of sherry. She just told him they needed help loading some boxes. John agreed, and just like that, he signed off on his fate too. He would never make it back home. On the moor, he was met with the same fate. The pair did unspeakable things to this kid. Assaulted, mutilated, and killed. Ian even photographed the aftermath as some sort of sick trophy. In fact, he took a picture of Myra standing on top of the freshly dug grave of this little kid. And just like that, 2 children were gone. No one knew who to blame, and meanwhile, Ian and Myra just looked like your normal couple. They took walks, dinners with family, church on Sundays, just an average couple madly in love. What could possibly be wrong? But behind closed doors, they were planning their next murder. June 1964, Keith Bennett was only 12 years old. Walking to his grandmother's house, the boy never arrived. Myra played her part in this too. She tricked the young boy into her mini pickup, then drove the boy to his gruesome fate under the false pretense of looking for a glove. Now, the thing that I really think is sad about this specific story is that Keith's body has never been found till this day. And it gets worse. Keith's mother has been searching for decades. Oh, gosh. Her dying wish was only to find the remains, but again, it never happened. Myra didn't break her silence, even the location was secret. Even behind bars, she didn't give up Keith. Now, nobody knows why, but maybe it was her final act of control and power. Despite all of the murders being just as gruesome, if not more, it was Leslie Ann Downey's disappearance that shook the whole of Britain. Only 10 years old, Leslie was snatched from a fairground on Boxing Day 1964. Myra again played her part perfectly as bait. First, she noticed that Leslie had been isolated from her parents. Reacting quickly, she asked Leslie for some help. That right there was enough to get the kid in the car. The couple then took the young kid home, stripped her, tied her to a bed, and tortured her. And guys, they recorded it. The authorities even played it in open court. I'm speechless. Even detectives that were on this case were crying because of this. And Leslie begged for her life, and she was pleading for her mother. And Myra Hindley, she didn't even flinch. Just like that, the couple had tortured and killed 4 kids. Then came the final known victim of Brady and Hindley. It was late on the 6th of October 1965, when the couple drove to Manchester Railway Station. Brady picked up Edward Evans, who was a 17-year-old apprentice engineer. They drove him to their house under the guise of a sexual encounter. Wine to relax and music to get things started. Somewhere between all of this, Myra disappeared to fetch Ian Smith, who was her brother-in-law. The plan was to make Smith a part of their circle. Smith had been inspired by Brady, but he felt something was off the minute he arrived. It wasn't until Ian bludgeoned Edward to death that Smith immediately ran out of the place and straight to the police. That's when the police raided the house. They found weapons, blood, and clues. But it wasn't until they found a bag at Manchester Central Station that things got out of hand. They discovered the body of Leslie Ann Downey, along with an audio tape. my gosh, Myra and Brady were just monsters. And finally, they were caught, found guilty of multiple murders. Both were sentenced to life in prison, but somehow Myra tried to get out of the mess by claiming she was innocent. Huh, woman? What part of this are you innocent in? Talking about how Brady had manipulated her, how she was just a stupid girl in love. Girl, I'm in love too. You don't see me murdering people. What the? Anyways, even if some people had developed a soft spot for her, the audios changed everything. She was caught yelling "shut up" to Leslie. The photos that were found were more evidence of just how evil Myra truly was. In 2002, she died of heart failure at the age of 60. And if you ask me, I'm surprised she lived that long. I would have killed her my damn self. She took her secrets to the grave, like where Keith's body was buried. How much she enjoyed it all, but no one truly believes that she's innocent. She was a willing participant, a cold-hearted killer. And again, one of the most dangerous women in the history of mankind. And we're not even done. Moving on to the woman who claimed she only killed out of self-defense, but ended up becoming one of the deadliest female serial killers in American history. And I'm talking about Aileen Wuornos. Aileen's story begins with abandonment back in 1956 in Rochester, Michigan. Her father, convicted child molester, and he hung himself in prison. Her mother, not honestly much better, left her when she was only 4 years old. So to no one's shock, by 11 years old, Aileen was already trading sex for cigarettes and also food. In her early teenage years, she already learned how to evade the authorities. And by 14 years old, she was pregnant. Not willingly though, it was from sexual assault. But as a result of that, she was kicked out of her house by her grandfather. Homeless, pregnant, nowhere to go, it's hardly a surprise that Aileen grew up to have such a tough life. By age 20, she'd been arrested for a DUI, for firing a weapon from a moving car, and also assault. Despite it all, what Aileen did was far worse. And also, all of this only contributed to her ruthless and cold killing streak. In the late 1980s, she came across Taria Moore, a waitress. She was quiet and reserved. Aileen was drifting across Florida selling her body on the highways. She was hitchhiking, living off scraps, all of it. So it wasn't a surprise that she fell hard for Taria. The waitress became her world, and to support them both, Aileen continued her ways. Basically by doing tricks on highways. Until one night in 1989, something suddenly snapped that day. Richard Mallory, her first known victim, took Aileen to a motel. Apparently it was a normal night, but as per Aileen, things went south quickly. According to her, he had sexually assaulted her and also beaten her. And it was all in self-defense that she pulled the trigger. Multiple times. Aileen maintained her innocence, claiming it was survival self-defense. But the police actually didn't buy it. And I guess after researching everything, they were right not to. As the months rolled by, more bodies started piling up. On June 1st, 1990, a 43-year-old construction worker, David Spears, was found nude in Citrus County. He'd been shot 6 times in the torso. Then Charles Carskadden's body was discovered. He was a 40-year-old part-time rodeo worker in Pasco County, shot 9 times in the torso and stomach. Soon after that, in Marion County, they found the body of Troy Burris, a 50-year-old salesman, on the 4th of August, 1990. Less than a week after, he was reported missing. Okay, when he was found, he was fairly decomposed, but the examiner found 2 gunshots in his, you guessed it, torso. All of it was the work of Aileen and her .22 caliber pistol. Oh, but she wasn't just done yet. A month later, a retired Air Force major, police officer, and Florida child abuse investigator, Charles Dick Humphreys, was found dead. And what I find interesting is that he was also found in Marion County. Gunshot wounds to the head and torso, and a car later discovered in Suwannee County. Finally, they found the partially disrobed body of Walter Antonio, and he was found in Dixie County. A 62-year-old man shot 4 times in the back and head. All the work of the infamous Aileen Wuornos. And guys, every single time Aileen told the police, hey, it was self-defense. The reasoning, it was the same. They were trying to hit and sexually assault her.
Now, what I find interesting is that the evidence told a completely different story. Cash, luggage, electronics, everything was discovered in pawn shops sold under Aileen's name. Fingerprints returned a match on the stolen vehicles. And worst of all, Taria knew everything. In fact, when the police caught Aileen in 1991, they got their hands on Taria first. A deal was on the table, all for testifying against her lover. Otherwise, her funky ass would be facing charges herself. Aileen, though, she confessed to everything. She wanted to protect Taria. What she didn't know was that Taria had already told the police everything they wanted to know. And Taria walked free. On January 16th, 1992, Aileen was sentenced to death for killing Richard Mallory. 6 more death sentences were picked up. In total, it's believed she killed 7 people. 6 bodies were discovered by the police, while Peter Seams's body is still missing. He was a 65-year-old resident of Central Florida. His car was discovered in Orange Springs in July 1990. Witnesses described 2 women near the car around the same time Seams went missing. But it wasn't a mystery for long, as Aileen fully revealed the story through her interviews. And boy, were they bone-chilling and articulate. There was an obvious anger in her, but underneath that anger, Aileen shows calmness too. She claimed the police wanted her to kill, because they could have arrested her sooner, but she claimed society turned her into a monster. Her eyes, wide, unstable, and glassy, stared directly into the lens. And this is her words: "I'm a serial killer. I killed them, I robbed them, and I'd do it again." Aileen believed it was revenge on the men that were abusing her. And then on October 9th, 2002, she said no to her very last meal. Florida State Prison happily agreed, and Aileen was executed by lethal injection. Her last words, frightening to say the least. "I'll be back like Independence Day, with Jesus, big mothership and all. I'll be back." At the time, Aileen became the first female serial killer to be executed in the US in more than 50 years. And she was by far the most terrifying. And finally, we have the true story of Juana Barraza, also known as the Silent Lady because she was a professional wrestler in Mexico. Her story is a little bit interesting because it's a story of rage, twisted justice, and trauma. She led a double life, hiding behind masks both in the ring and in real life. This story begins in Hidalgo, Mexico, in 1957 when Juana was born. Like most people on this list, her childhood wasn't filled with toys or love. It was filled with nothing but pain and abandonment. Her mother was a raging alcoholic and an addict. She was so far gone that she traded her daughter to a man. And guess what? For a few beers. Juana was 13 years old when the abuse began. She was beaten, sexually assaulted. Eventually, she got pregnant. And then beaten again. As she grew up, the rage that she felt inside didn't fade away. It only festered inside and it found a target. That's how she remembered her mother, and boy, did she hate her mother. All of her victims reminded her of her. And like you would expect, all of her victims met a brutal end. Between 1998 and 2006, dozens of elderly women were found dead in Mexico City. Strangled, beaten, bludgeoned with irons, stethoscopes, even statues of saints. Now that one's kind of messed up. But anyways, the underlying patterns were always the same. All women that were over 60. Each of them also lived alone. And every single one of them died in their homes. Her modus operandi wasn't that complex. Gain trust, which was done either by dressing up as a nurse or house help. Sometimes she even claimed to be from the government aid program. She'd help them bring groceries, and then once she was inside, she would just go completely berserk. Juana was a wrestler, so she didn't face much resistance. Her blows were vicious and fatal. Some victims were found with phone cords tied to them, others with their own tights. With the city in panic mode and police clueless, Juana would return to the ring at night. The media dubbed her La Mata Viejitas, which in English means little old lady killer. Among the chaos, the police arrested dozens of trans women and cross-dressers. And they were so confused, the police believed maybe the killer was hiding in feminine clothing. They were close, but not quite. As for Juana, she hid in plain sight and continued her killing spree. Her double life was the perfect disguise. hiding behind a mask, wrestling in lucha libre matches. But no one looked that closely. I mean, she was powerful, stocky, and cold. Nobody suspected a thing. That's until January 25th, 2002. That's the day everything came crashing down for Juana. An elderly woman named Ana Maria de los Reyes Alfaro was found dead in her home, murdered in cold blood, strangled with a stethoscope. But this time, there was a witness. Ana's neighbor had seen a stocky woman in red leaving the scene in a hurry. Only a few minutes later, Juana was arrested in the street. She had stolen a couple items from the victim's house. Ladies and box heads, it was over. Even though Juana maintained that she had done nothing wrong. The evidence, it was piling up. Her fingerprints were found in at least 10 murder scenes. And then she finally confessed to killing one woman, claiming that the elderly woman had insulted her. But after a little bit of digging, the police realized that she was lying. Authorities believe she murdered between 42 and 48 women, making her one of the most prolific female serial killers in history. In 2008, Juana Barraza was sentenced to 759 years in prison. Mexico had never dished out a sentence that gosh darn big. The wrestling star turned serial killer was behind bars. The masked woman who crushed the weak with her bare hands. Her rage exploding into a killing spree spanning years. But despite being locked up, Juana didn't cry or beg for forgiveness. She only had one singular request, which you're definitely gonna think is weird. Can I keep watching Lucha Libre on TV? What? You are in prison for killing how much is it? 42 to 48 women. And all you gotta say is let me watch a Lucha Libre? Not even box head? Seriously? To this day, Juana remains in a Mexican prison. She's alive, silent but alive. The silent fighter in the ring to the silent killer in the streets. Yeah, feel me. But what I can say is she's one of the most dangerous women to ever live. If you thought the women in this video were scary, wait until you hear about the youngest serial killers to ever exist. No, seriously, one of them was just 10 years old. Yeah, click the video on the screen if you want to hear more about that.